Chapter 597. Come to think of it, it's really rare to see a self as unique as you, Shiwei Adrian said, his gaze sweeping over Su Shenxing's head. Are you trying to pick a fight? Although Su Shenxing wanted to ask, aren't you dead? When he thought about it carefully, it wasn't unthinkable that he could live for 1,000 years in another world. In fact, it would be strange if he couldn't live that long. He was the type of person who said, "You're so embarrassing. Just leave the group." It wasn't that Su Shenxing had too much self-awareness, but with Shiwei Adrian and Su Shenxing included, all of them basically weren't normal people. Each of them had the power to shatter the saying that humans have limits. To put it in a more modern way, Su Shenxing in every world seemed to have something similar to a protagonist's aura. And I don't think now's the time to have a peaceful chat. Su Shenxing turned back to look at the humanoid monster shrouded in black mist, before turning to the one called Shiwei. At first, Su Shenxing had thought that it was a monster that was using his own body to reincarnate. But now that he was here, it was obvious that his guess was wrong. You're right. Shiwei put the vampire girl aside. It's going to be troublesome if you people collapse this world after so much trouble. Do you recognize this thing? Just as Su Shenxing asked Shiwei, the black fog monster had already charged at him and clashed with him. But this time, Su Shenxing wasn't as serious as before. After all, there was another him who he didn't know if was friend or foe watching from the sidelines. I guess you could say that. Shiwei replied after staring at the black fog for a moment. Then, Shiwei spread his arms, and a mysterious pressure shrouded the entire place. The monster in the black fog was directly pressed to the ground, leaving a human-shaped imprint on the hard stone. You might not like the sound of that, but I'm afraid you can't win against this monster. The other party seemed to still have some strength left. He was actually able to chat cheerfully with Su Shenxing. It's not that I'm not strong enough. In fact, in terms of destructive power, even the current you is not below me. But this monster isn't so easily defeated. What the hell are they? Indeed, Su Shenxing was quite displeased with the other party's tone of concluding that he could not defeat the black fog monster. But the reality was as such. Even if Su Shenxing was serious in this state, and even removed the cloud scale as a limiter, he still could not cause any decisive damage to the other party. The punch that could even destroy the world just now had only caused the black fog around the other party to shrink by a little. It is the aftermath of the Age of Destruction. Shiwei's expression was solemn as he spoke slowly with great solemnity. You'll die if you don't. Su Shenxing cursed in his heart. Don't underestimate this thing just because it's just the aftermath. It was something more profound and ancient than the origin of the world. Before I met this thing, I always thought that the void was the end of everything, including time, space, and concepts. Compared to the singularity that gave birth to everything, it was the focus of all existence. But in truth, the so-called Age of Destruction is the true form of that thing, and not limited to this world, but the true end of everything in the multiverse. Even as he spoke, Shiwei Adrian clenched his right fist, and the existence known as the Apocalypse Shockwave was utterly destroyed, revealing the mangled flesh within. However, one could still tell that it was the corpse of the short and stout grave robber who had summoned the black fog. What you did is completely different from what you said. Is this a demonstration to me? Su Shenxing immediately frowned because of the other party's behavior, first emphasizing that a certain existence was awesome, and then killing it instantly was a common way of showing off. I could destroy it not because I'm much stronger than you, but simply because I've experienced the Age of Destruction. You can understand it that way, but only those who have experienced it, or are currently experiencing it, can truly touch and resist the Age of Destruction after understanding the end of all things time, space, energy, and concepts. The other party indicated that he had no intention of showing off, but there was a vague sense that he was showing off between his words. Just as Su Shenxing was about to say or do something to stop the other party from showing off, the vampire queen who had been put down not far away moved first. She didn't care that she was wearing a more formal dress and ran towards Shiwei Adrian. The latter smiled and opened his arms to her. Then the Queen of the West punched him in the face. You bastard! Come out if you're not dead. How do you think we survived for 1,000 years? After the punch, The Queen of the West, who had looked incomparably cold, burst into tears. Everyone's dead. Even the Academy doesn't exist anymore. An apologetic smile appeared on Shi-Wei Adrian's face. At first, Old Su thought that he would be watching a tragic drama of the Jade School, but he didn't expect that in the cemetery not far away, the same black mist would emerge from the corpses of the gravediggers that had been swallowed by the black mist. Probably under the influence of the black mist, the corpses of the gravediggers that had died rather miserably stood up like undead creatures. There were more than 20 of them, and although they were weaker than the first one, they weren't that much weaker. With the advantage in numbers and the ability to ignore Su Xinxing's fists as Shi-Wei had mentioned, it was going to be a fierce battle. You don't have to do anything against these guys. But Shi-Wei Adrian didn't seem worried at all. It just so happens that I have something to explain as well. What? Su Xinxing, who had been rubbing his hands in anticipation, was stunned. In the world we live in, when a person breaks through to a certain realm, they can comprehend abilities that ordinary cultivators can't achieve. We call it a miracle, Shi-Wei said slowly. As a transmigrator from a modern society devoid of any mysteries, I possess a miracle that can eliminate all supernatural beings and powers. It's not scientific at all. At the same time, I'm essentially a different person compared to before I transmigrated, which is why I've obtained an additional miracle, double existence. What? Su Xinxing was confused by his words. Don't panic. What's next is the main topic, because I led everyone from Audiobook Academy and some other colleagues to save this world. I came to an agreement with the Chaos Vortex and obtained a new miracle. It is a miracle that can elevate me and the heroes of the Adrian Academy to a higher existence. As he spoke, the color of the sky behind him gradually became strange, and then became a color that spread a mysterious radiance like the stars. Many figures could be seen in the midst of this mystical color. Su Xinxing even saw the mayor of the city that he had met not long ago in Luomosai, the girl named Theo. The third miracle has begun. Praise our great cause and victory. Descend, Adrian's throne of heroes. Chapter 598. The colors of the sky and earth gradually faded, finally sinking into the endless darkness of the night along with the world around them. In this world of nothingness, only the radiance of the nebula remained, and a crystal throne slowly appeared from within. It was like the palace of the gods, filled with a sense of holiness, mystery, and inviolability. Just by standing on the edge of the sky, the nothingness was filled with an indescribable sense of majesty. Without needing to test it out, Su Xinxing was sure that the crystal throne was much sturdier than this world. At the very least, he was not confident that he could destroy it with a single blow since his power had been greatly reduced. At the same time, Su Xinxing, who had once destroyed a world for some reason, could also feel that the throne had already transcended the boundaries of a normal world, reaching the level of self-consistency. The reason it continued to rely on this world was purely to use itself as the last barrier to protect this world. After that, the people in the nebula began to materialize. There was a female swordswoman with the silhouette of a winged angel floating behind her back, a female mage with fiery red hair, a female puppet master controlling several small puppets, a female warrior wielding long and short swords, a cute girl dressed as a maid for some reason, and the mayor of Luomosai with a paralyzed face. By the way, why are they all women? There really is something wrong with me in this world. Although that was what he said, there were also men who appeared later on, such as a priest with a ghostly right hand, a spearman riding a sapphire dragon, a dragon slayer wielding a flame-shaped greatsword, a blind youth with a guardian spirit floating behind him, and so on. However, women still made up the majority. We won't lose if we're comparing numbers. As if he did not hear Su Xinxing's retort, Shi-Wei Adrian spoke nonchalantly. The vampire queen, who was standing not far behind him, was in a state of shock. Clearly, the people who appeared from the nebula were her friends who had passed away in the last 1,000 years, and some of them even greeted her as they passed by. So what's going on? After a long moment of confusion, the vampire queen grabbed Shi-Wei's collar and asked loudly, "Didn't I explain it just now? This is the third miracle where I use myself as the foundation to upgrade the heroes who participated in saving the world into heroic spirits after their deaths. Adrian's heroic spirit throne? Sylvie, who was being rocked back and forth at nearly Mach 1, answered innocently. But, if that's the case, why didn't you tell me in advance? The mature and noble vampire queen was now like a little girl. If that's the case, wouldn't I look like an idiot after being sad over their deaths for so long? Then, Su Xinqing saw a rather blatant expression of surprise on her other self's face. But the moment the vampire queen raised her head, her other self immediately returned to her serious expression. Su Xinqing couldn't help but sigh. No matter which world he was in, he was still the best actor. No, before that, you bastard, you should have come back earlier. Why? The vampire queen was already on the verge of tears. Why did you make me wait for 1,000 years? Finally, the expression of the guy named Seve Adrian turned serious. I'm sorry, Shalon. Although we successfully avoided the Age of Destruction in that war. No, before the war began, I realized one thing. My existence is quite special, and could even trigger the Age of Destruction. That's why I chose to die a natural death after that. Sylvie Adrian sighed helplessly. After becoming a heroic spirit, although I could hide myself in the world barrier with the heroic spirit throne, if I were to show myself in the prime material plane, it would almost certainly trigger an information tide in the Sea of Ether, and trigger the Age of Destruction again. Actually, in order to prevent the appearance of the information tide, apart from Eliza who can observe the soul domain, there shouldn't be anyone in this world who knows that I'm still alive. Yep, if this state can be considered alive. Then he added. Su Xinqing and the vampire queen wanted to say something, but that was when chaotic shouts came from the heroic spirits. Dean, this thing is the same as the Age of Destruction. We can't hold on much longer. Dorothy, take it. This is my last bit of mana. Damn. This is a tricky idea. Camille, help me. It's fine, Tanis. He'll be revived from the heroic spirit throne soon. It was only then that Su Xinqing realized that the heroic spirits who were ganging up on the black fog monsters were now at a disadvantage. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the black fog monsters seemed to have realized that they couldn't win with numbers alone, and so simply gathered together, fusing into an even larger black fog. Even if Su Xinqing couldn't see through the black fog, he could tell from the heroic spirits' battle against the Dehe fog that the black fog's true form had probably become a rather bizarre ball of flesh. Moreover, the damage reduction effect of that strange black mist was truly frightening. Although the heroic spirits were able to hurt their opponents just like Sul Adrian, even some of their more powerful attacks were reduced by the black mist, and the damage they dealt to their enemies was almost negligible after being reduced by the black mist. Looks like I'll have to train harder from now on. Seve Adrian sighed, speechless as he face-bombed. Surround that thing and don't let it escape, he said loudly. I'll take care of it myself. Then his gaze fell upon Su Xinqing. The essence of my next attack is to connect to the chaos vortex and correct all anomalies in the prime material plane. As one of the anomalies, you should be sent back to your original world. If there's anything you want to ask now, ask as soon as possible. That's good. Su Xinqing didn't beat around the bush, and went straight to the point. From what you said just now, the Age of Destruction seems to be connected to you somehow. And since you dared to show yourself, does that mean there's no connection? To be precise, the Age of Destruction is connected to us. And according to my initial plan, the Age of Destruction wouldn't come to this world after you appeared, which is why I could show myself without worry. You're saying it as if the Age of Destruction is afraid of me, but why do I feel like you're implying something else? Su Xinqing looked at him with a half-smile. For example, I'm the Age of Destruction? Chapter 599. You're being paranoid. The Age of Destruction is not something a single person could become. Wei Adrian quickly denied Su Xinqing's theory. Although you don't appear to be in your normal state in front of me, I can see that your power is essentially the same as mine, which is why you wouldn't become the Age of Destruction. Su Xinqing stared at him for seconds before looking away. That's really good news, he said with a lackadaisical tone. I'm not interested in destroying worlds either. From that point of view, you're really a very orthodox me. Su Xinqing appeared to be very happy, but his words sounded as awkward as a malady. What do you mean? Su Shenxing was puzzled. Before I knew of the Age of Destruction, I had met many us from other worlds, and some of them even held a certain degree of hostility against me. But when the Age of Destruction truly came, they did not allow it to destroy their worlds, but instead used all of their abilities to try and save their worlds. Perhaps because there was not much time left, Su Shenxing did not keep Su Shenxing in suspense, and instead told him about his past and experiences. I think that's the main reason why infinite worlds would choose us to transmigrate and gain power. No matter what sorrows we experience or how heavy our fate is, as long as it's me or me, we would always choose to save the world. Su Shenxing did find it interesting when he put it that way. In his past experience, there were times when there was no need to save some worlds, but he would still act as a savior to defeat the Demon King's army, saving and liberating those worlds. Just like the more than 9,000 lattice worlds in the past, the fastest and safest way to cut off the power supply of the great demonic realm was to destroy the worlds that were still in the shape of crystal balls from the outside. But Su Shenxing and the others still chose to enter those small worlds to complete their mission as heroes, although some of the worlds were destroyed by Su Shenxing and the others due to operational errors. Now that he thought about it, he had clearly sensed the malice of the people he had saved before. He even had a vague premonition that they would betray and stab him in the back. In the beginning, the hot-blooded desire to save the world with a sense of justice gradually cooled down in the face of helpless and dirty reality. It seemed that those worlds were no longer worth saving. Even so, in the end, they still resolutely chose to save those lattice worlds. In addition to the promise he had made to the deceased, the most fundamental reason was probably the instinctive sense of responsibility that was engraved in the depths of his soul. From this point of view, the self of every world might have the feeling of wanting to save the world. Sorry, I accidentally said too much. When people get old, they probably like to ramble on and on about useless things. Shiwei Adrian suddenly laughed. He lowered his head to avoid a shrieking heroic spirit as it flew towards him, before returning his gaze to the battlefield. If there's nothing else, I'm going to make my move. What is the essence of the era of destruction? Su Shenxing snapped out of his daze and quickly asked, That's not something I can say. I'm afraid you'll have to witness and understand it yourself to understand. Shi Wei replied with a bitter smile. And that skull? With that being the case, Su Shenxing quickly asked about the main purpose of his trip. That skull seems to have been devoured by the remains of the era of destruction. I probably can't get it back, sorry. Then what will happen to you after that? In fact, you're already dead in your current state, right? Su Shenxing asked again. I will continue to watch this world's operation with my heroic spirits as an eternal guardian and witness. When it deviates from its path towards destruction, I will correct it until it reaches an unavoidable end. Shiwei Adrian replied, although that means I'll never be able to leave this world. But since it had taken care of me so much when I was alive, I can still repay it this little bit. Eternity. Su Shenxing had seen similar creatures before. However, there was no such thing as an eternal being who would find the endless life to be something to be happy about. Moreover, the fear of death would accumulate as time passed, and in the end, it would become a contradictory existence that feared death even as it found life dull. That was definitely not something to be happy about, and it was not difficult for himself, who had once stood at the peak of the world, to realize that. In fact, the 1,000 years he had spent hiding in the world barrier and watching everything was probably hard enough for him. Even so, himself had decided to continue protecting this world that was not his home but had once nurtured something he cherished, until the end of the world. Su Shenxing did not even dare to imagine how much courage it would take to do that. If he had looked down on himself, who was hiding from the era of destruction when he first arrived in this world, and only began to treat him seriously after learning about what had happened, there was no doubt that he was looking up to himself with respect now. The huge crystal throne behind Shiwei Adrian slowly unfurled and turned into a huge crystal world tree. Shiwei himself was standing at the top of the world tree, overlooking everything in the void. Then, Su Shenxing noticed that there were many specks of light that resembled stars appearing in the void, each of which was a scene of the world outside the constellation of heroes. World concept foundation complete, all things always bright loaded, rule calibration confirmed. Now, in the name of Shi-Wei Adrian, guardian of the world, correcting the world. As Shi-Wei chanted, the crystal world tree began to emit a dazzling radiance that filled the entire void. The huge black fog monster was like a snowman exposed to sunlight, and it began to melt at an extremely fast speed. When the black fog was completely gone, Su Xinxing's body gradually became transparent as well. Is there really nothing else to say? Shi-Wei asked Su Xinxing for confirmation one last time. Su Xinxing was silent for a moment before saying, I hope that you could help take care of Louise. I will. Shi-Wei agreed without hesitation. Just as Su Xinxing was about to disappear completely, Shi-Wei Adrian suddenly said, Don't lose to the age of destruction. Okay. Su Xinxing smiled. Who do you think I am? Ah, you're finally awake. Xinxing. The first thing he saw when he opened his eyes was Qin Xingyan's surprised smile. How long have I been asleep? Su Xinxing asked as he stretched lazily. Most of the morning. How do you feel now? The girl asked in concern. I'm fine, just a little hungry. That's good. You gave me a fright when you suddenly fainted. Qin Xingyan breathed a sigh of relief, but then noticed that Su Xinxing's expression was a little off. What happened? He asked worriedly. I had a very long dream. Su Xinxing sighed. My heart felt heavy. Is that so? Do you mind telling me what the dream was about? That's not a problem, but I'm a little hungry now. Before Su Xinxing could finish, Emily suddenly ran out of the kitchen with a casserole on his head. He placed the casserole in front of Su Xinxing with a clang. Mr. Landlord, this is the porridge I made. Although he was happy that this girl was finally a little more sensible and knew how to make some food for him. But the problem was that the strange and evil liquid in the void didn't seem to be something that could be called porridge, no matter how he looked at it. Would he faint for half a day after eating this? Su Xinxing couldn't help but worry about his future. Chapter 600. Yingying. Do you know about the ghost story that's been circulating around the school recently? Not long after school started, a girl who was close to Cui Yingying asked her mysteriously, There's something like a ghost story in our school. Cui Yingying was shocked. After all, she herself had a series of supernatural experiences. In her opinion, even if there were unclean things like demons and monsters in this school, there was an 80% chance that they would be hammered to death by her friend Jasmine. If Emily couldn't handle it, there was still that mysterious landlord. Of course there are, and there are surprisingly many of them. The girl's face was full of surprise. For example, last semester's most famous mysterious disappearance of food from the cafeteria. Almost a ton of food suddenly disappeared under the surveillance camera. Experts have verified that the surveillance camera wasn't tampered with, and the real culprit is still a mystery. We don't even know what kind of crime the culprit used. Other than this is an incredible supernatural event. There is no other explanation. It's Emily, and last semester's quite famous video game Ghost Incident in school. The IT teacher had forgotten something in the school, so he came in the middle of the night to retrieve it. In the end, he saw that all the computers in the school's computer lab were turned on, and every computer was running a popular online game at the time. The characters in the computers had even formed a guild called Nest, Demon King, Money Farming, and were fighting against other guilds in the game. But there was no one in the computer room. It was too scary. It's Emily again. And last semester's super famous resentful spirit incident after school that almost made it to the newspapers. At that time, every evening after school, the last person to leave would hear the sound of, "Landlord, I hate you." And for some reason, they couldn't find the source of the sound. Almost 100 people have encountered this phenomenon. It can be said that it's a publicly recognized supernatural event. Isn't this still Emily? It would be better to say that no one could tell from that super representative self-description. Cui Yingying suddenly felt tired. So what's the latest incredible ghost story? Mo? Did that spirit do something strange again? Yingying, why do you think these things are all done by the same spirit? The girl asked curiously. Intuition. Cui Yingying replied resolutely. The girl who was overwhelmed by Cui Yingying's presence had no choice but to continue with the latest rumor. The latest ghost story is not this kind of wandering spirit at school, but a cursed Blu-ray disc that is inhabited by evil spirits. That's Sadako, right? And it feels like it's been out of date for many years. Cui Yingying couldn't help but complain. I wasn't even born when that movie was released. Speaking of which, why is it a blue light? Could it be that even ghosts can keep up with the times? I feel like something's not quite right. However, according to my friend's classmate's uncle's nephew's classmate's friend, a victim has already been born. The other party said mysteriously, "Isn't this relationship back to square one? Maybe that uncle has 2 nephews." Cui Yingying, "You're right. I have nothing to say." She sorted out her thoughts. In other words, the victim's story hasn't been proven yet? Perhaps even the existence of that blue light plate is a problem. About that blue light. Clang clang. The other party used her mouth to add the sound effect of a prop from Doraemon while taking out a very crudely packaged Blu-ray disc from her chest. "It's here. Why would you bring something like this with you? No, wait, where did you put it before this?" Cleavage. Cui Yingying was shocked. Today, the girl's worldview had been greatly impacted. "I saw the boys showing this off over there, so I took it." The girl who didn't look like a middle school student said with a wicked smile. "You?" Cui Yingying's face was full of helplessness. "Then have you seen it?" "No," the other party answered matter-of-factly. "I didn't dare to see it, so I gave it to you." "Are you treating me like a lab rat?" "Don't give me that kind of expression. Those stinky boys were fine after seeing it, so it's probably just a rumor. Plus, you're the hero who was able to tame the Demon King Mo. This kind of small thing shouldn't be a problem for you. So Mo is actually quite cute. Why are you all so afraid of him?" "That cute one is only on the outside. If he's Godzilla on the inside, then spare me." "Forget it, let's not talk about this anymore." The other party seemed to be afraid of Mo's topic. She stuffed the Blu-ray disc into Cui Yingying's arms and quickly left. "Tomorrow, remember to tell me what's inside the disc." Cui Yingying could only sigh helplessly. She placed the transparent box with the disc on the table, then poked at the box and called out tentatively in a soft voice, "Mo, what's the matter?" In the end, Jasmine popped out from behind her and asked, "Eh?" The frightened Cui Yingying made a strange sound. "When did you get there?" "When the flat brackets appear. Although I don't know what you're talking about, my intuition tells me that it's not something good." Cui Yingying looked at the Blu-ray disc again. "Mo, do you want to see this?" "I want to see. I don't have anything at home that can read Blu-ray discs." Mo replied expressionlessly. However, Cui Yingying, who had recently become familiar with Mo, noticed that the little girl seemed a bit depressed. "I remember that you have a PS console in your apartment. Can't you use that to read the disc?" Cui Yingying asked in confusion. Mushroom secretly took it back. Jasmine replied first. Then, as if she had thought of something, she added, "Yes, speak. You still haven't given up on that habit of yours." "Yes, Dezawa. There's even a new variant." Cui Yingying casually ridiculed, then thought for a moment. "Speaking of which, I think I have a device at home that can read Blu-ray discs. Do you want to come over and see?" "What?" Mo raised both his hands. Although his expression didn't change, he gave off a feeling of very happy. So after sending a message to Su Shunxing, the 2 Lolis went to Cui Yingying's house to see the so-called cursed Blu-ray disc. Chapter 601. Cursed Blu-ray disc? Su Shunxing looked at the serious expression on Xiao Zhengyi's face and could not help but sigh. With pity in his voice, he said, "Is your super admin office finally so incompetent that you've started to deal with this kind of thing? I also hope that this is just *King joke." Xiao Zhengyi rubbed his face that was about to stiffen from maintaining the same expression. "But based on the current situation, this might be real. Then why are you telling me this like you're telling a ghost story?" Su Shunxing looked at him with condescension. "Isn't this better for the atmosphere?" Xiao Zhengyi said sheepishly. And his actions did have a certain effect. At least Songyu, who was there earlier, had already left Sakura Apartments under the banner of taking Dog Girl out for a walk. At the same time, Qin Xingyan walked to the window and pulled open the thick curtains. Instantly, the red rays of the setting sun once again flowed into the originally dark room. Combined with the family bucket and a pile of chicken bones in front of Su Xinxing, the hard-won horror from before was completely dispelled. When Emily comes back and finds out that you've finished the whole bucket alone, she'll be very sad. The girl looked at the satisfied Su Xinxing and could not help but smile bitterly. It's okay. She's going to her classmate's house today, so she should be back late. By then, I'll have already destroyed the body. After Su Xinxing said that, he turned to look at Xiao Jingyi. For the sake of Kaifeng, so there's already a victim? He wiped his fingers with a napkin and asked curiously. Actually, there are some very strange things about this. Xiao Jingyi hesitated for a moment before saying, Actually, we received the news relatively late. At the time, this cursed Blu-ray disc ghost story had already been circulating in Jiangjin for quite some time. It's quite widespread, so I'm afraid many people have already seen the Blu-ray disc. Isn't the real body of that thing with you? Regarding this, Su Xinxing could not help but reveal a surprised expression. He thought that the group of people from the super administrative office were unable to deal with the curse on the blue light, so they came to ask for his help. That's hard to say. Xiao Jingyi looked like he was troubled by how to explain this to Su Xinxing. You see, these kinds of ghost stories are cursed after reading them, right? However, in this kind of ghost story, there would normally be a method to remove the curse. It's diffusion, right? After hearing what he said, Su Xinxing understood. However, Qin Xingyan, who had just entered the secular world to cultivate, looked confused. Spread? Well, to make an analogy, it's probably the people who watch this video will die. If you want to live, you have to copy it and show it to a certain number of people. Su Xinxing patiently explained to her. Fortunately, the girl was quite smart. She immediately understood what he was saying and deduced many other things. I understand now. It's actually a variant of the if you don't repost, you're not XXX in Weibo, right? Well, it's more or less the same. Although Su Xinxing felt that there should be a subtle difference between things like reposting koi and this thing, because he did not want to continue explaining, he wisely chose to brush it off. If the two of you are done whispering intimately, Xiao Jingyi coughed dryly to get Su Xinxing and Qin Xingyan's attention back to him. Then I'll continue with the main topic. Intimately? Qin Xingyan's face turned red. Su Xinxing's expression did not change. He just waited for Xiao Jingyi to continue. As of now, there are no victims. Xiao Jingyi looked at Su Xinxing's fierce eyes. He immediately cleared his throat and continued. But there are related victims? Are they injured? Or is he unconscious or something like that? Qin Xingyan's curiosity was piqued. Perhaps it was because he had never encountered such an incident since his debut. It's the former. Xiao Jingyi's expression became serious. Xiao Qing and I once went door to door to investigate the families of the victims who were said to be involved in the cursed blue light supernatural incident. We also learned some things from some of the people involved. Perhaps he was thirsty from talking, or perhaps he just wanted to liven up the atmosphere. He paused for a moment and picked up the teacup in front of him with his unhealed right hand. After taking a sip of tea, he continued, according to the people involved, after the Blu-ray is released, the first thing that will be shown is some irrelevant scenes. Some are advertisements, some are games, some are talk shows, and some are TV dramas. In short, if you stop at this stage, nothing will happen. However, if you continue to watch, what if? Qin Xingyan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. First of all, the brightness of the TV screen will start to dim inexplicably. Then, there will be flickering images and large snowflakes. Wait a minute. Su Xinxing, who had been calm from the beginning, suddenly spoke. Qin Xingyan was startled. Blue light equipment is usually connected to LCD TVs, right? When I worked in the shopping mall over there, I learned that modern LCD TVs are different from the old TV at home. Even if the channel can't be received, there won't be large snowflakes. It should be a blue screen. For some reason, he seemed to be very proud of his work in the shopping mall. That's the problem, Xiao Jingyi continued, but his voice was getting deeper and deeper. His tone became more and more sinister. After that, the entire TV screen will be distorted. A strange dark red color will appear on the screen like flesh and blood. The scene inside will also be distorted because of the distortion. No matter what is being broadcasted before, it will become as tragic as Avicii. Finally? Qin Xingyan was very engrossed in listening. In the end, the blue light equipment will burn due to the overload that is theoretically impossible to achieve. Why is it that we were talking about TVs just now, but the blue light equipment is the unlucky one in the end? Su Xinxing couldn't help but complain. According to the routine, shouldn't there be something crawling out of the TV? Because it's the blue light disc that's being cursed. Maybe that thing's magical power is limited and can only affect the blue light equipment. Xiao Jingyi tried to guess. Now that you've mentioned it, no matter what the culprit is, it's going to be a lowly one. According to the bureau chief, Su Feng, 90% of the incidents that our super administrative office handles are of the low-level type. On the other hand, Jiang Jin is too abnormal. If it's not a large-scale invasion of foreign demons and ghosts, it's a situation at the level of immortals fighting. Our super administrative office can't do anything other than clean up the aftermath. Xiao Jingyi said with an embarrassed expression. You have to enjoy the process? In this regard, Su Xinxing, who didn't know if it was because of his protagonist aura, could only laugh dryly and comfort him. Maybe there will be the end of the world soon. You're not comforting me at all. You're making me even more worried. What the hell is the end of the world? 2012 is already over. Xiao Jingyi, who accidentally heard some shocking secret, was in a bad mood. Don't panic. Let's continue to talk about the curse. Sigh anyway. Even if the end of the world is really coming, I can't help much. Xiao Jingyi became even more depressed. He simply said, in short, after the blue light equipment burns out, the victims will feel that there is always something around them. In fact, there is indeed some kind of invisible thing following them and constantly exerting pressure on them on a psychological level. At first, because of the pressure, they will overeat, then indescribable irritation and fear of flowing water, then continuous and uncontrollable rage, and then they will start to self-harm. The injuries I mentioned before are basically the same situation. After the impulse to self-harm passes, there will be a short cooling-off period. This is the sage period. Don't be ridiculous. After the cooling-off period, if they still don't copy the disc to others, the symptoms on the disc will repeat, and the situation will be more serious than the first time. Xiao Jingyi sighed. For those who haven't survived the second round, the victims will basically complete the diffusion requirement during the first or second cooling-off period. After that, the symptoms caused by the curse will slow down and disappear within a day. Instead of calling it a curse, it feels more like some kind of strange infectious disease, Qin Xingyan speculated. Indeed, diseases like rabies would also have symptoms such as fear of water, anxiety, and irritation. To be honest, if it's just these symptoms, then it's fine. The key problem is that after we organized a physical examination of the victims, the results showed that parts of their bodies were missing. It's not the tissue that was missing during the onset of the disease, but something more subtle, like congenital defects that disappeared directly. For example, if the defect is in the heart, the ventricular wall will be slightly thinner than normal people's. If the defect is in the large intestine, the intestine will be slightly shorter than normal people's. However, because the defect is very small, nothing has happened so far. Probably only people with defects such as the eyeballs will have blurred vision. Xiao Jingyi's face darkened. Then there's the main point. According to the statistical integration of the defect, the total mass of the defect is roughly enough to piece together a person. For a moment, Sakura's apartment was shrouded in a strange silence. If I'm not wrong, Xiao Jingyi finally concluded his words. Now, there might be one more person in Jiangjin City who originally didn't exist. Chapter 602. Cui Yingying's father was working overtime as usual, so she only needed to prepare dinner for herself and Molly. Cui Yingying did not go to the nearby Costco supermarket with Molly because she was very concerned about that plate of blue light. Instead, she bought 2 lunches from a 24-hour convenience store on her way home from school. What's the matter, Emily? After Cui Yingying paid, she found Emily staring at the transparent crisper beside the counter. What is that? The little girl pressed her finger against her lips and tilted her ahogue as she asked. Cui Yingying followed her line of sight and found that she was looking at the roasted sweet potato in the crisper. That's right. It's already autumn. She couldn't help but ask Emily curiously. Emily, have you never seen a sweet potato before? Sweet potato? The little girl thought for a moment, and then showed an expression of sudden realization. As expected, things like sweet potatoes should be quite common. A distant relative of landmines? That's not right. You obviously know about landmines, but you don't know about sweet potatoes? That's the monster Dezawa that can fight evenly with Bichimos. What's that? And that idiom is enough. Could it be the holy fruit that gives you unlimited magic power after eating it? Who is it? Who the hell instilled in you this kind of cliché that few readers can understand? It seemed that Emily really didn't know about sweet potatoes. Cui Yingying confirmed in her mind. Of course, I can't rule out the possibility that he was taught some strange knowledge by someone. Could it be? Emily swallowed his saliva. This is very delicious? If you have to choose between delicious and not delicious, it should be considered delicious. Cui Yingying didn't have any special fondness for roasted sweet potatoes. They belonged to the type that she would only eat on a whim. However, according to her taste, that was no different from that of normal women. The sweet and soft roasted sweet potato could indeed be classified as delicious. Jasmine turned her head and stared at Cui Yingying with pitiful puppy-like eyes that were filled with pleading, causing the latter to feel a ton of guilt. All right, I'll buy it for you, so don't look at me like that. Cui Yingying, who was soft-hearted to begin with, quickly compromised. Emily cheered in her distinctive, soft, emotionless voice. Ha! Emily's influence is making me want to try it out. In the end, Cui Yingying, who paid for 2 roasted sweet potatoes again, couldn't help but sigh. The cashier's gentle expression, as if she was looking at a pair of close sisters acting coquettishly, made her lose the mood to even explain. What should I do with so many extra calories? Oh, so bad. Emily, who was standing at the side, clearly wasn't afraid of calories. Instead, he exclaimed about the roasted sweet potatoes with an attitude, as if he had discovered a new continent. However, because his mouth was stuffed with food, his speech was slurred. Cui Yingying peeled off the aluminum foil and pried open the perfectly roasted sweet potato, revealing the tender yellow and fragrant contents. Because she was afraid of the heat, she only carefully took a bite. Then, she couldn't help but mutter in a low voice, although it's indeed very delicious. Because it's very hot, Jasmine, you have to be careful when you eat. In the end, when she turned her head, she found that Emily's hands had nothing left, including the skin of the sweet potato and the aluminum foil. Emily, don't tell me you even ate the skin and the aluminum foil? You can't eat those too. Emily, who was licking his fingers, froze for a moment, then pretended to be serious and replied, The flavor is very unique. I suggest you try it. No way. Humans can't digest that kind of thing. Cui Yingying couldn't help but ridicule. By the way, Emily, are you really okay? Do you need me to contact Sakura Apartments' landlord? It's fine. Emily didn't mind at all. Compared to the dragon-slaying sword, this is much easier to digest. Just say it. At this moment, Cui Yingying felt that if she continued to pay attention to Emily's previous recipes, her sanity might start to decrease. For the sake of her mental health, she decided to pretend that she didn't hear what he said just now. After eating their lunch, what came next was the main business of the day. Emily sat on Cui Yingying's bed and curiously stared at the TV. Cui Yingying took out the CD from the CD case and put it into the DVD player that was said to be able to read Blu-ray discs. After a moment, the TV with the signal set up appeared on the TV screen. Amazing, XX Lord Zero can actually do something like this. No. It's going to break. My Zero is going to break. It looked like Ivy's. Chui Yingying's face turned red as she used her remaining willpower to pick up the remote control and sped it up at 32 times the normal speed. After a few minutes, we can't. Patrice go. This time it looked like calcium tablets. How is this a curse? That guy was definitely tricked by those bastard boys. Chui Yingying's entire body felt unwell because she saw a rather unsightly scene. Emily continued to use pure and curious eyes to look at the two brawny men wrestling on the screen. Ugh. I feel like I've been defiled. Emily, don't look anymore. Chui Yingying let out a long sigh and picked up the remote control to turn off the device. That's right. How can there be so many incredible things in this world? But before she could press the button, the image on the TV screen began to change. First, the image began to flicker strangely. Then large patches of snowflakes began to appear on the screen. It was like an old TV with bad reception during the CRT era. The startled Chui Yingying subconsciously pressed the standby button on the remote control. But the image was still in a state of bad reception. Not only did the CD player in the TV cabinet not go into hibernation mode, but it also vibrated slightly and made a strange sound. It was probably the feeling of some kind of liquid boiling in the DVD player's casing. Then, the distorted image became even stranger. It even seemed like blood was seeping out from the screen. Gradually, the entire image was filled with an uncomfortable bright red. Accompanying this strange change was a hair-raising, ear-piercing sound effect from the TV speakers. This? What's going on? Chui Yingying, who was not mentally prepared, was stunned. Jasmine, who had been indifferent until now, finally raised her small face as if she had sensed something. Her small and delicate nose twitched for a moment, and then she furrowed her brows in an imperceptible manner. Strange smell. Chapter 603. Ah, it's true. Chui Yingying, who had been scared out of her wits, regained her senses and smelled a burnt stench. But she soon found the source of the smell. The Blu-ray device that looked like a DVD player had stopped vibrating and was now sizzling with smoke. There was a high possibility that the insides of the device had been burned down for some unknown reason. Her rationality told her that she should pull the plug quickly to prevent a fire. But the strange scene on the screen and the occasional electric sparks from the Blu-ray device made her a little scared. It's not that smell. Can't you see? Emily sat on the bed with his arms crossed in front of his chest. He closed his eyes and pretended to be deep in thought. Then he slammed his fist as if he had thought of something. Emily, what are you doing? Then Emily ignored Chui Yingying's scream and used his hands to cover the latter's eyes. After a while, he let go of his hands. Geez, you scared me. Before Chui Yingying could finish complaining, her voice suddenly stopped. Because there was a face right in front of her. Well, let's call it a face. It was a pale, skinny, bloodless face. The face was covered with strange wrinkles that were obviously different from the wrinkles of an old person. Its right eye was sunken and there was no eyeball at all. At first glance, one could see the white bones at the edge of the eye socket. Its left eye was raised high and the pupil was pitifully small. The white of the eye occupied most of the eye and was filled with a sense of madness that would make one's scalp tingle. It had no nose, only two black triangular holes like a skull. The corners of its mouth were cracked all the way to its ears. The part where the lips should have been was gone, and in its place were bright red gums and uneven teeth. At this moment, this thing that could not be called a face was less than 20 centimeters away from Chui Yingying, and it grinned at the girl. So the girl's eyes rolled back and she fainted. Ah! Probably realizing that he had done something bad, Emily blinked and let out a short and flat cry. Because Chui Yingying had fainted too quickly, she did not know that the face was actually growing on top of a cloud-like object. Furthermore, there were dozens of similar faces growing on top of that cloud-like object. Right now, the eyeballs of those faces were all looking at Jasmine. If it was anyone else, even if they were not afraid of ghosts, they would probably feel their scalp tingle from being stared at by so many pairs of eyes. However, Jasmine didn't feel anything at all. Instead, She looked at the burnt blue light equipment. The cloud of mist had come from the blue light equipment. Until now, the milky white fog was still pouring out, was still growing. It was growing larger and larger. Although Jasmine didn't know how this thing worked, in reality, this type of ghost was like an echo wall, constantly reflecting and amplifying the emotions of the person it was looking at. For example, Cui Yingying's first reaction when she saw the face was fear. In fact, most people's first reaction when they saw that thing was similar. Then, her fear was continuously reflected by the object. In the end, the fear was too much for her to bear. Under the safety mechanism of the human brain, she fainted. If not for this, a ghost face alone would not be able to scare people until they fainted. After all, a human's psychological endurance was often much stronger than one could imagine. After that, the ghost obviously wanted to repeat the same trick on Emily. But when it started to reflect Emily's emotions, it felt that something was wrong. If Cui Yingying's emotion was so scary, then Emily's emotion looks like cotton candy. I want to eat it. I don't know if it tastes good. After the reflection, Cui Yingying's emotion was unparalleled fear. Emily's emotion was it really is cotton candy. I really want to eat it. It must be delicious. And so, under the gaze of the ghost faces, Emily swallowed his saliva. The ghosts were silent for a moment. Then, as if time was rewinding, the smoke that had already filled half of the room rushed back into the blue light device. I ran away. Emily, who did not manage to eat it, looked very disappointed. A little girl with a gloomy expression walked on the streets of Jiangjin. More than half of the cursed discs that she had sent out to collect human tissue had been destroyed by the super-administrative office. The rest of the discs had either been thrown in a corner without anyone noticing, or the owner had no intention of looking at them. What made her even more upset was that a strand of her soul had almost been eaten, physically, by a little girl who was even weirder than herself. No, if this continued, this body would start to rot. Then, everything she had done before would be in vain. She had to complete the body before it rotted. Can I only use a slightly more radical method? The reason why she spread the cursed discs was because her main body had previously resided in the discs. Secondly, it was a safety measure. She would not encounter any powerful people who would instantly purify her. But now that her main body had been transferred to this body, and she had spread the discs in Jiangjin, she had more or less figured out that there were no temples in Jiangjin. Even the nearest Bailu temple was more than 10 kilometers away. It should be fine if her actions were a little more radical. As she thought about it, she saw a young man walking slowly with a plastic bag in his hand not too far away. She showed a flirtatious smile and quickly ran to his side. She hugged the young man and buried her face in his chest. Big brother, save me. Someone was chasing me just now. What? Who? The young man looked confused. It's a bad guy with a scary face. The girl continued. Bad guy? Scary? The young man looked even more confused. Yes. The girl suddenly raised her face, revealing her scary face in her ghost form. It's a face that looks like this. Then, she waited expectantly for the young man to feel scared. But the young man was only surprised for a moment. He frowned and suddenly shouted, Emperor! Then, an indescribably terrifying pressure almost crushed the girl's vengeful spirit. She was so scared that she let go. She did not care about the loss of her magic power and the damage to her body. What's the matter? After that, the sword spirit of the Emperor's sword gradually appeared beside the young man. I met a demon just now. The young man was naturally Chintua, who had come out to buy things. But if it was scared away by you, it should only be a small demon, right? Too much. If you want to talk about the seniority of demons, it's at the level of a 1,000-year-old ghost. A small demon without a few hundred years of cultivation is no match for it. So, it's your fortune to be able to become the sword master of my generation. What kind of half-hearted answer is this? A sword spirit also has dignity. Do you want to eat chestnuts? Yes. The dignity of a sword spirit is really cheap. In a small alley not far away, The ghost girl who had escaped was curled up in a corner, trembling. As a spirit body, the Emperor's sword spirit's pressure on her was too strong. Even if she just stood beside the other party for a moment, there was a possibility that her soul would dissipate. I didn't expect that uncouth-looking young man to actually be a ghost tamer, and he's even raising a 1,000-year-old ghost. But if that's the case, my guess is correct. No one even cares about a 1,000-year-old ghost of that level. Other than the few mortals in the super administration office, there shouldn't be any other experts in this city. As long as I'm careful and don't meet that ghost tamer again, it won't be a problem to heal my body. Thinking of this, the ghost Loli, who was full of confidence, once again mustered up her energy. Chapter 604. After carefully avoiding the 1,000-year-old ghost and her ghost tamer, the ghost girl continued to wander aimlessly on the streets of Jiangjin. At first, she was still a little worried, but after a long time, there were still no other ghost tamers or cultivators who appeared to take her in. This made her braver. This was not the first time she had transformed. In the past, when the CD was being spread in other cities, there would often be people who claimed to be the super administrator who would come and destroy the CD in large quantities not long after she transformed. They would also kill her, who had just transformed, at the same time, so she could only barely escape back into the CD as a remnant of her soul to live on. However, this time was different. Although the people from the super administrative office had also destroyed the discs, they didn't come and find trouble with her. This made her confirm her guess. Sure enough, the ones maintaining order in this city were only those two mortals. It seemed that as long as she was careful of the 1,000-year-old ghost and the ghost tamer, she could live in this city without any worries. Thinking that her long-cherished wish of many years could finally be fulfilled, the ghost Loli suddenly felt a little elated. The pitiful little girl didn't know that the reason why Xiao Jingyi and the other members of the super administrative office didn't come and find trouble with her was purely because the instruments distributed by the super administrative office in Jiangjin were of the less sensitive type. They didn't have any reaction to a ghost with weak spiritual power like her. As for those instruments that detected supernatural forces, as long as they were slightly more sensitive, they would directly overload and burn due to Emoli's existence. Humph, what should I do first after I come back to life? How about eating popcorn and watching a movie first? I've wanted to do that for a long time. Also, ice cream looks great, but it's almost winter now. I wonder what hamburgers taste like. It's so hard to decide. The ghost Loli's imagination ran wild as she searched for prey. However, because she didn't dare to walk on the bustling main roads, she chose to walk on the more remote paths near the outskirts of the city. In addition, the weather was getting colder, so there were almost no pedestrians on the road. After a long time, her eyes lit up as she found a suitable prey. It was an adult and a child walking hand in hand. The older girl looked to be in her 20s, but she seemed to be wearing some kind of evil warding treasure. With the lowly ghost's yin-yang eyes, most of her body was covered by a dazzling light. If it wasn't for the fact that she looked like a mortal, the lowly ghost would have turned around and fled. As for the little girl who was about 12 or 13 years old, she didn't have anything that could ward off evil spirits. She was about the same age as the lowly ghost. If he wanted to collect the final fragment, she was undoubtedly the most suitable candidate. At this moment, they were standing in front of a store that sold sexy underwear. The girl with the evil warding treasure hesitated for a while before saying to the little girl, "Chuketsu, I'm going in to buy something. Stay here and don't move." Probably because she was afraid that the other sex toys in the store would influence the pure and innocent little girl, the girl didn't intend to bring her in. The little girl nodded obediently. "Okay. Big sister Songyu." Thus, the young woman with the evil warding treasure walked into the shop, leaving the little girl alone at the entrance. What a heaven-sent opportunity! The lowly ghost couldn't help but be overjoyed. Because she was afraid of scaring away her prey, she simply turned into a spirit and quietly approached the other party. At this moment, something strange happened. A British short-hair cat emerged from the little girl's shadow. Its yellow and orange eyes stared at the approaching lowly ghost. Due to his sudden appearance, even the lowly ghost was startled. "Is it the same kind?" The mutual reaction between spirits made her realize that the other party was also a spirit. Thus she calmed down. Although she was afraid of demons because of her cultivation, if the other party was just a spirit, then as long as it wasn't a 1,000-year-old ghost, everything would be fine. In the end, the British Shorthair stood up in front of her stunned gaze. Then it curled its paws and made a fist. Although it was hard to believe, a cat really made its paws into a fluffy little fist in a way that defied biology. Moreover, the cat made a pose like a boxer. Without waiting for the lowly ghost to come back to her senses, the cat rushed forward and punched her chin with a rising dragon fist. Although the ghost was only a lowly, compared to a cat it was already huge. But at this moment, she was sent flying by the cat's rising dragon fist. If it weren't for the fact that ordinary people couldn't see spirits, this scene would be like an exaggerated cartoon of a cat and a mouse, full of comical feeling. Woo! After the lowly ghost landed, she held her chin and let out a mournful cry. But then, her heart burned with fighting spirit. It's just the spirit of a cat. How dare it be so arrogant? Then, she waved her little fists and rushed towards the other party. In the end, the cat easily dodged her fist like a boxer and counterattacked, giving her a good beating. After losing to a cat with a huge score of 10-26-0, the lowly ghost whimpered, covered her beaten head and ran away. Wow! Even my father can't beat me. What's wrong with that little girl? Songyu, who came out of the shop after buying things, saw the lowly ghost running past and couldn't help but ask curiously, I don't know either. Chuketsu, who didn't know that his guardian spirit had beaten up the other party, also shook his head in confusion. In the shadow behind her, the British Shorthair acted as if nothing had happened. It nonchalantly used its tongue to comb the fur on its paws, then disappeared into the shadow. Woo! In the end, not only did I not get a fragment, I also lost a lot of magic power. Speaking of which, is that girl also a ghost tamer? Just how many ghost tamers are there in this city? The lowly ghost, who finally stopped crying, sniffled and held her deflated stomach, muttering pitifully. But since her body wasn't complete yet, she couldn't eat anything. If she wanted to fill her stomach, she could only do the same thing as other ghosts: absorb the life force of living things. As expected, wandering around the streets is too inefficient. Otherwise, I could just take the initiative and sneak into a random house. Even if I can't get a suitable fragment, I can at least absorb some life force. Thus, she thought for a while, then turned into a spirit and flew to the middle floor of a nearby apartment. She didn't choose the lower floor because she was afraid of being discovered by the ghost tamers again. If she flew too high, the wind would be a greater threat to her spirit, so it was better to go to the middle floor. Oh, is there no one in the house? There was no life force in the house, so it seemed that the owner hadn't returned home yet. How unlucky, but it seems like they have a pet. Forget it, anything will do. Anyway, let's absorb some life force first. Thus, the lowly ghost turned her gaze to herself and felt that the source of life force wasn't human. Then, she stared blankly as a lizard very skillfully climbed out of the glass tank, then calmly nestled on the sofa, revealing its belly like a paralyzed Guyu. It used its tail to roll out the remote control from under the pillow, and used the tip of its tail to poke the standby button to turn on the television. Then, it skillfully chose a drama about mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, and watched it with great interest. After a while, probably sensing the lowly ghost's gaze, the fat lizard turned its head and saw the lowly ghost, whose lower body had turned into smoke, floating outside the window, looking at it blankly. The ghost and the lizard stared at each other for a moment. Then, Chapter 605. Oh, was it just my imagination? Felt like the monster just now wasn't that powerful. After running for at least 3 kilometers and confirming that nothing was chasing after her, the ghost lowly finally let out a sigh of relief and began to recall the situation just now. Due to the fact that spirits were greatly countered by demons, and to most demons, the so-called vengeful spirits were basically just supplements. Therefore, the spirits that had regained their intelligence were very afraid of demons, and the Lolita was naturally the same. Even if she had the same kind of ability as herself in the bell, she was still just a vengeful spirit. In terms of grade, she couldn't even compare to the spirit ghosts in Sakura's apartment. Forget it, there's no benefit even if I beat the monster. Let's go. After continuing to wander the streets for a while, the ghost Loli suddenly felt a strange throbbing, or rather, a sudden impulse. That strange feeling, as if there was a voice in the unseen world, made her almost instinctively walk in a direction. A moment later, she arrived in front of a high-rise apartment that was similar to the one from before. Although she didn't know what was inside, the feeling that made her jump for joy from the bottom of her heart made her unable to suppress it. She involuntarily turned into a spirit and passed through the glass door that required a swipe of a card, then floated up the stairs. Although she could directly fly through the ceiling to her destination, in the end, her rationality made her prioritize preserving her magic power and chose to take the stairs. As for why she didn't take the elevator, it was purely because this ghost who had been dead for who knew how long and hadn't even eaten a hamburger didn't know that there was such a thing as a box elevator. After floating for a long time, she finally arrived at her destination, outside the door of an ordinary-looking apartment. At this point, she already had a rough idea of what attracted her to this place. Spiritual chi. It didn't seem like something that could appear in this age of chaos. It was as if it was directly extracted from a spirit vein, incomparably pure and thick. Just like how catnip had a fatal attraction to most cats, pure spiritual chi had an irresistible attraction to ghosts. This kind of attraction to ghosts was even stronger than the life force they needed to survive. It was precisely because she felt this incomparably pure spiritual chi that the ghost Loli recklessly came here as if she was possessed. There was no human life force inside, but she couldn't rule out the existence of monsters. But if it was for the pure spiritual chi behind this door, the ghost Loli felt that even if she had to face a monster like that, she would probably have the courage to fight to the death. Thinking of this, she resolutely passed through the security door and crashed into the apartment. In an instant, the pure spiritual chi flowed through her limbs and bones. That indescribable comfortable feeling even made the ghost Loli feel as if she was soaking in a hot spring. "Oh, what is this thing?" A voice sounded in front of the ghost Loli. As expected, a place that could be compared to a paradise. She circulated the little bit of magic she had left, opened her eyes, and looked in the direction of the sound. Then she saw a pair of slippers looking at her with interest. "It feels like a person, but there's something wrong with it," said the bear embroidered on the left slipper. "But people can't pass through the door, can they?" Little bear on the right slipper added. Was it a slipper that had turned into a spirit? She could also defeat the other party. Maybe it's a Taoist priest who knows how to pass through walls. At this time, an even deeper voice sounded. The ghost Loli was shocked and immediately looked at the other party. In the end, she was dumbstruck as she saw the sofa not far away open and close, and the voice just now sounded. "It's just like the animation that was shown on TV yesterday." In the end, just as she finished speaking, the 42-inch rear projection television turned on by itself, and a man's voice sounded from the speakers. "Rua, embarrassing." Not only that, but the ghost Loli also discovered that the shoe cabinet beside her, the coffee table in front of the sofa, the fruit platter on the coffee table, the chandelier on the ceiling, the dining table near the kitchen, a few chairs, the air conditioner in the corner, and even the bed in the bedroom were all monsters. In fact, if not for the short lifespan of the apples in the fruit platter, they would probably have already become monsters. The ghost Loli's best method of scaring people was to use 10 or so ghost faces to stare at the victim at the same time. But now, she was being stared at by hundreds of pairs of eyes. She turned pale with fright and gradually turned white. Right at this moment, a loud shout interrupted the noisy voices of these demons. "All of you shut up. Let this old man speak." On the bookshelf, a rather old book jumped down by itself and jumped in front of the ghost Loli like a crab. Then, it returned to its original position with the cover facing her. On the cover, there were 4 conspicuous words: Ideology and Politics. Young girl. At this moment, the Ideology and Politics textbook had the face of a preacher. "Do you believe in materialism? Today, we will talk about the materialist worldview that is full of the characteristics of the Celestial Empire. If you have any questions, you can ask after I'm done. Yeah. The ghost lowly screamed and ran forward, directly through the glass window of the living room, and jumped down from more than 10 floors. Even the ideology and politics textbook was stunned. After a while, it muttered, "If you don't want to listen, then don't want to listen. Why do you have to commit suicide? It's not good to hit the flowers and plants. This is a sign of not understanding Marxism and not having self-awareness. Alright, whose turn is it today?" Thus, the kitchen cabinets and cabinets tacitly moved their gazes away. Young people these days, forget it, I'll wait for Xiao Jingyi to come back before I tell him. The ideology and politics textbook shook its cover and then crawled back to the bookshelf like a crab. Something was wrong. There was something wrong with this city. Other things aside, the number of monsters was too terrifying. The ghost lowly felt that she had lived for so long. No, she had died for so long. But she had never seen so many monsters. Could it be that, without her noticing, the monsters had successfully counterattacked the humans and occupied the city? No matter what, she couldn't stay in this place anymore. This city is too strange. No, I have to go to another city to be haunted. The ghost lowly, who didn't feel that she was a strange existence, calmed herself down and made the decision to leave this city. However, because she was distracted, she didn't notice the strange situation of the buildings around her gradually increasing in size. Chapter 606. When her face hit a transparent wall, the lowly ghost, who was clutching her forehead and crying out in pain, suddenly realized that something was wrong with her surroundings. Whether it was the buildings on both sides of the street, the flowers by the roadside, or the trash can, they had all become a lot bigger without her noticing. But then she realized that it was not the things around her that had become bigger, but she herself had become smaller. Then, she realized that what she hit was not a transparent wall, but the bottom of a bottle. She did not know when, but she was inside a glass bottle. Before she could try to get out, the bottle was picked up from the ground and covered with a cap. The lowly ghost's ability to go through walls seemed to have lost its effect. No matter how hard she struggled, she could not get out of the bottle. Then, she saw the person who trapped her through the glass bottle. The person looked to be about her age, a little girl with a mushroom hairstyle similar to cherry meatballs. But the other party seemed to have not slept well for a few days. Her eyes were like a dead fish's with a strange light. "I caught her just like that. This ghost is surprisingly stupid." The other party shook the bottle, causing the lowly ghost to feel dizzy before muttering in a low voice. Then, a middle-aged man behind her asked excitedly, "Earth God, what kind of magic weapon is this? Is it like the purple gold gourd in Journey to the West?" "No, it's just an ordinary bottle that I tore off after eating the yellow peach in syrup." The girl half opened her dead fish eyes and shattered the man's dream with a lackadaisical tone. "I originally wanted to use a cola bottle, but a few days ago, I sold all the plastic bottles at home to the garbage collector." At this moment, Ding Yang was greatly shocked. Wait, could this be the legendary magical power that could turn grass, wood, earth, and stone into magic weapons? Fortunately, the worldview of the nerdy cultivation novel was unbreakable. Soon, he found a theory to explain this situation from the novels he had read before. As expected of Earth God. So, he flattered from the bottom of his heart like a fat translator in a Nazi movie. "There's no need to say such things." Earth Goddess lowly yawned. "I still have something to do later. Take this ghost to Sakura Apartments and let that person deal with it." "No problem. Leave it to me." Ding Yang patted his chest and swore, "I will definitely hand this over to that master successfully." The sleep-deprived Earth God lowly didn't say anything. She just passed the bottle to Ding Yang, turned around, waved her hand, and staggered away. After watching the ghost leave, Ding Yang sized up the ghost in the glass bottle. Although his cultivation level wasn't high, he was still a cultivator, so he could still use his spirit vision. At this moment, the lowly ghost had already lost her human form. Instead, she was like a drop of ink that had fallen into clear water. She had turned into a mass of pitch black, constantly churning and surging, but no matter how hard she tried, she was unable to escape from the bottle. Although the black mass gave off the feeling of smoke, the bottle was actually quite heavy in his hand. According to Ding Yang's estimation, it probably weighed about 5 to 6 kilograms. After spending some time to make sure that the black fog couldn't break out of the bottle no matter how hard it tried, Ding Yang was finally relieved. He called a taxi and planned to go to the suburbs. However, before the taxi arrived, Ding Yang felt that the glass bottle in his hand suddenly lightened. Shocked, he hurriedly took the bottle in front of his eyes to examine it, but found that it was empty. How is this possible? There was no obvious gap on the bottle, and he had only slightly diverted his attention, but the thing inside had escaped. Full of doubts, he thought for a moment and carefully opened the bottle cap. Almost at the same time, a gust of air suddenly blew out of the bottle. It really was a trick. Suddenly, Ding Yang understood. The ghost probably had the ability to fly to a certain extent. When the earth god handed the bottle to him, it deliberately flew downward. Because the bottle was blocked by the earth god's divine power, the downward force was very weak. However, it was enough to give Ding Yang the illusion that the bottle was very heavy. After that, it suddenly stopped flying downward and just hovered in the bottle, turning itself transparent through a trick. This sudden change would give Ding Yang, who was holding the bottle, the illusion that the thing inside had escaped. And what the ghost was waiting for was the moment when Ding Yang opened the bottle cap in order to confirm. You're actually so scheming. Damn little monster. Ding Yang, who had figured out the cause and effect in an instant, became angry out of humiliation. He picked his ear and took out a flying sword that was about half the length of a toothpick. In the end, just as he got into position and didn't have time to make the sword art to make the flying sword grow, a taxi not far away honked at him. You're the one who called the taxi, right? The taxi driver poked his head out of the car and looked suspiciously at Ding Yang, who was in a strange position. You can't stop here for too long. If the traffic police see you, you'll be in trouble. Hurry up and get in. But I have something to do. Hey, if you have something to do, don't call a taxi. You're wasting my time. The driver frowned and his face darkened. He cursed and left, leaving Ding Yang standing alone in the autumn wind, feeling awkward for some reason. Oh no, a monster! Ding Yang, who had finally regained his senses, looked up, but there was no trace of the ghost. This city is too scary. I've had enough. I want to go home. The ghost lowly transformed into a spirit and quickly ran through the streets. She had forgotten about finding prey, gathering a body, and coming back from the dead. Now, she only wanted to leave the scary city as soon as possible. When she met a 1,000-year-old ghost, she could still comfort herself that this city was a paradise for ghosts. When she met a monster, she could still force herself not to panic. But King hundreds of monsters of all shapes and sizes, and an expert who could shrink her into the size of a date and put her in a glass bottle. The appearance of these two factors caused her to break down. After running for more than 10 minutes, she suddenly saw a young man with a hedgehog head walking in front of her. He had thin hair and was holding a Blu-ray disc that contained part of her. Suddenly, as if she had seen a relative, she turned into a gust of wind and flew towards the disc in the young man's hand, wanting to hide inside. Chapter 607. When Song-yu returned to Sakura's apartment, she found Su Shunxing looking at Sakura's closet with a complicated expression. After she coaxed Chuketsu back to his room, she asked Su Shunxing the reason. Su Shunxing awkwardly scratched his head. It's a bit complicated. He didn't seem to know where to start explaining. After a while, he helplessly continued. You'll know when you get close to the closet. Is that so? Song-yu blinked in confusion, because she believed from the bottom of her heart that Su Shunxing wouldn't harm her. She followed his instructions and approached the closet that was usually used to store out-of-season bedding. Woo-woo. As a result, Song-yu discovered that the closet was emitting waves of a woman's resentful sobbing. Did you lock Mo Lee in there? Song-yu couldn't help but ask curiously. This kind of thing can't lock up Mo Lee? Su Shunxing sighed. Then who's in there? Lu Zhengjing? Why would I lock up a shut-in girl in a place like this? That's true. Song Yu touched the handle and found that the closet wasn't locked. Huh. It's actually open? Can I open it? Go ahead. Su Shenxing didn't move. So the girl opened the closet and found a little girl in white about the same age as Emily curled up inside. At this moment, the little girl was hugging her knees and curled up into a ball, trembling and crying. She kept muttering things like, "This city is so scary. I want to go home. Humans are so scary," and so on. She looked very pitiful. But this wasn't the main point. The main point was that beside the little girl, there were two balls of ghostly blue phosphorescence that could only be seen in cemeteries. Song Yu hesitated for a moment, then closed the closet door again and looked at Su Shenxing. Although she didn't say anything, the meaning in the girl's eyes was very clear. What kind of thing did you bring back this time? Su Shenxing could only smile bitterly. Listen to me, it really has nothing to do with me this time. I was just walking on the road when a gust of demonic wind suddenly blew, and then a sinister aura swept towards me. Any normal person would subconsciously throw a punch in the direction of the sinister aura, right? I think a normal person would choose to run. The girl didn't hesitate to ridicule Su Shenxing. In short, was it because you punched her that she was so scared? Well, to be honest, the situation back then was quite tragic. Even though Su Shenxing had only subconsciously attacked without using much strength, not even a complete corpse was left behind. Pieces of flesh, broken bones, pieces of internal organs, and blood covered most of the street. The largest piece was no bigger than a fingernail. It was as if a bomb had exploded in one's body, and it was the kind that had a huge explosive yield. In a sense, compared to a murder scene coupled with the somewhat gloomy weather, it was closer to the style of a horror movie. The kind that told the story of a psychopathic murderer. Xiao Jingyi, who was called over by Su Shenxing to clean up the scene, was probably still miserably sweeping the street. Interestingly, Su Feng, who arrived later, did a rough DNA comparison on the pieces of the corpse and found that the DNA of the pieces of flesh was actually very different. They didn't even come from the same person. The result was obvious. The guy who was constructed by collecting the body tissues of the victims was punched into shit by Su Shenxing. The paranormal case that had troubled Jiang Jin's super administrative office for nearly a week was mysteriously solved. Not only was Su Shenxing dumbfounded, but even the super administrative office had a rather subtle constipated expression on their faces. It was not easy for them to muster up the energy to do something, but in the end, Su Shenxing closed the case with a punch. It would have been fine if they had gone through a meticulous reasoning and a fierce chase. But to come across and end the case when they were just out shopping, they just couldn't get over it. In the end, the body that was left behind was relatively intact. The only thing that was left was the body that was trembling in fear due to the various strange things that happened in Jiangjin. It was unknown if it could still be considered a vengeful spirit. Actually, it's fine now. When I brought her back, she had been hiding in the CD and refused to come out. In the end, Su Shenxing did not forget to add, "I see. She's the vengeful spirit in the cursed Blu-ray CD that Officer Xiao told you about." Although he took the dog girl out for a walk because he was scared, he still had some understanding of the topic because he heard the first half of the story. Then how did you get her out of the CD? Did you play the CD? Ha ha ha, I don't want to boast. But I don't have anything that can play Blu-ray at home. Well, I do have a VCD player. Su Shenxing replied with a smile. I'm not boasting, and it's a VCD player and not a DVD player. How many years ago is that thing? Song Yu could not help but facepalm. There's also a VCD player that can play videotapes, but it's been in the attic for a long time. I don't know if it's working properly. Su Shenxing did not care much about this. After all, whether it was a VCD player or a DVD player, it was basically useless in this era where people could watch videos on their mobile phones. As for how I got her out, of course, I used my fingers to pinch her and directly pulled her out of the CD. Pinch where? How? Although she felt that there was something wrong with this method of exorcism, in the end, the girl decided not to say anything. In short, I probably used too much force when I pulled her out. After I got her out, she kept crying inside, giving me a bit of a headache. In the end, Su Xinxing came to a conclusion. He spread out his hands. This way, I can't even have a peaceful conversation with her. Maybe it was because he was too rough with her before, so he felt a bit guilty. This time, Su Xinxing did not simply choose to purify her soul, physically. Instead, he planned to have a good talk with her. Maybe everyone had the same feeling. When they played some horror games, they would feel scared because of the atmosphere. But when the boss appeared, there was no such feeling of terror. For players, it was probably the feeling of, as long as the HP bar is lit, even if it's a god, I'll kill you. The most terrifying thing was always the unknown. This was also true for normal people. Although Song Yu was still scared when she heard the ghost story, when she saw that the so-called vengeful spirit was just a little girl shivering in the closet. Plus Su Xinxing was right next to her. Song Yu's courage naturally grew. How about? She seemed to be interested. Let me try. Chapter 608. The lowly ghost, who had been pulled out of the closet by Su Xinxing, was kneeling on the coffee table, shivering. Song Yu sat on the sofa across from Fang Zheng, as if she was preparing for what she wanted to say. Su Xinxing leaned down on the sofa. As insurance, he looked at the girl and the ghost in front of him with interest. Let's start with your name. After a moment, Song Yu showed a perfect goddess-like gentle smile that she would only put on in front of outsiders and asked, "What's your name?" Shivering. The lowly ghost that was trembling like a little quail turned her head to look at Su Xinxing. If she wanted to ask for information, she had to make the other party let down her guard. Taking this into consideration, Su Xinxing rubbed his stiff face, then squeezed out what he thought, a smile as gentle as Song Yu's. Shivering. As a result, the lowly ghost trembled even harder. Song Yu glanced at Su Xinxing in annoyance. The latter was shamelessly whistling to the sky as if nothing had happened. Don't worry. With me here, he won't hurt you. And if you're obedient. So the girl could only try to comfort the lowly ghost that seemed like she would be scared into a puff of smoke and disappear at any moment. The lowly ghost carefully looked at Su Xinxing, but as soon as she turned her head, she found that Su Xinxing was also looking at her. She was so scared that she quickly turned her head and nodded at Song Yu. It's good that you can cooperate. Then the question from before, what's your name? Song Yu nodded with satisfaction, then repeated her previous question. Xiao Ruoying. The lowly ghost answered softly. Su Xinxing's eyes widened slightly. The same surname as Xiao Jingyi? Wait, if I remember correctly, that guy seemed to have said that it was an opportunity for him to apply for the police academy. It should be a coincidence, right? In the end, he could only come to this conclusion in his heart. Xiao Ruoying? It's a pretty good name. Song Yu took the opportunity to praise the other party's name, probably wanting to use this to ease the other party's vigilance. Unexpectedly, the lowly ghost continued to speak. Fan Shuachi, Feng Dexin, Wangji, Jidaichun, Yishuan, Fan Wen, Xian Wanlu. Ha! Song Yu was stunned. On the other hand, Su Xinxing seemed to have thought of something and frowned slightly. Could it be? Then, he asked the lowly ghost, are these the fake names you used when you took human form and mingled in human society? No, these are my names. Tisk, as expected. So, what are you guys talking about? If it's convenient, can you bring me along? At the side, Song Yu, who was being ignored, pouted and complained in dissatisfaction. When Su Xinxing heard this, he revealed a thoughtful and distressed expression. He was not good at describing things and did not know how to explain the lowly ghost's situation. It's not a riddle. It's just like what the other party said. What she said just now were all her own names. At this moment, a lazy voice came from the other side of the sofa. Song Yu subconsciously looked over and saw that the earth god of Jiangjin was curled up on the sofa, desperately holding up his heavy eyelids. His head was nodding, as if he would fall asleep at any time. This girl is an amalgamation of vengeful spirits. Even though it was suspected that she had not slept at all last night to cultivate, the lowly ghost's words were still coherent and clear. Just based on what I can sense, there are already more than 20 of them. However, the similarity of these vengeful spirits is rather terrifying, so from their behavior and appearance on the surface, it seems that there is only one person who is the same. 20. Song Yu first revealed a shocked expression, then instantly returned to her original appearance. She just stared at the lowly ghost lying on the table in confusion. It doesn't feel like there's anything to be afraid of? Because she was not a member of the circle, Song Yu did not know what these vengeful spirits represented or how terrifying they were. However, she knew one thing, and that was that as long as Su Xinxing was here, it did not matter what kind of monsters appeared. Indeed, whether it was 20 or an amalgamation of 200,000 vengeful spirits, there was almost no difference under Su Xinxing's fist. In any case, they would all be killed with one punch. Speaking of which, why are you here? Su Xinxing's attention also shifted from the lowly ghost to the earth god. Because Ding Yang said that he accidentally let that guy escape, so I specially came over to explain to you. At this point, the lowly ghost sighed. In the end, you guys have already caught it again. So this guy had already been caught. No wonder he had an uneasy expression when he saw the lowly ghost just now. As expected, in order to prevent it from escaping a second time, we should get a die ball. That thing doesn't work on spirits, right? How can you be so sure that it doesn't work if you haven't tried it? You have to be brave in everything you do. No, according to common sense, that thing has no way of touching spirits. You're talking about common sense with people in this rundown apartment. Stop. If you want to chat, wait until I'm done with my business here. Seeing that old Su seemed like he was going to talk for a long time with the lowly ghost, Song Yu immediately interrupted their interaction. Anyway, you guys should be quiet first. I'm not done with my questions yet. Su Xinxing and the lowly ghost looked at each other, then very tacitly quieted down. For Su Xinxing, Song Yu was responsible for almost half of Sakura Apartment's meals. If he angered her and she was angry, she would eat seafood for every meal. Old Su would probably have to go to the toilet and sleep on the floor. The lowly ghost was also very interested in this strange, vengeful spirit, so she quieted down and waited for the other party to continue. Seeing this, Song Yu continued to ask, "How did you become like this?" "I don't know." The lowly ghost shrank her neck and whispered, "When I woke up, I was already like this." "Then do you still remember how you died?" At this time, the god of earth interrupted and asked, "How I died?" The lowly ghost was halfway through her recital when her entire body froze. Immediately after, her body began to tremble slightly. It was not the kind of trembling just now, but as if she was recalling memories that she did not want to recall. It was a slight but uncontrollable tremble. Then, expressions of fear, hatred, sadness, and regret appeared on her face one after another. We were murdered." At this moment, she forgot to be afraid and cried out involuntarily, "Murder." Song Yu was startled by the other party. "I keep feeling." Su Xinxing's mouth twitched downward, and he rubbed his temples with a helpless expression. "It seems like we've been involved in something troublesome again." Chapter 609. Compared to a natural death, it was true that being murdered was more likely to cause the appearance of wraiths. However, compared to the wraiths in movies that could easily kill people, the wraiths in reality were actually quite weak. At most, they could make the murderer feel a chill run down his spine, but they had no way of dealing a fatal blow. After all, a spirit was just some kind of residue produced after a person died. Naturally, it was impossible for it to be stronger than when it was alive. If you couldn't beat the murderer when you were alive, how could you beat the murderer when you were dead? Moreover, just like a joke said, if a person killed by a ghost died and became a ghost, wouldn't it be very awkward to meet after death? Wraiths that could interfere with reality and cause the death of others had already broken away from the category of normal wraiths. They were under the influence of something and had undergone changes. They could be classified as monsters. It had to be said that the spirit ghosts under Old Su's command were this type of existence. However, the ghost lowly was a special case. Her essence was still that of a wraith, but because of some strange situation, nearly 20 wraiths had gathered together. Although it was still very difficult to interfere with reality, it could already affect the human mind. Do you want to find the murderer who murdered you to take revenge? With things as they were, Su Shinxing naturally didn't plan on staying out of the matter, so he straightforwardly asked. In any case, it was a scumbag who had killed so many people. In a situation where there was decisive evidence, if that person died in an accident, the people from the super administration probably wouldn't say anything. Speaking of which, you shouldn't be a local wraith, right? However, before the other party could answer, the Earth God lowly spoke first. As far as I know, there hasn't been a serial murder case with as many as 20 people in Jiangjin in the past 10 years. Speaking of which, it seems that the main culprit, the Blu-ray disc, really did come from somewhere else. Being rebuked like this, Su Shinxing also remembered this matter. Southern Chu. Although my initial memories are a bit hazy, we came from Southern Chu. The ghost lowly said in a small voice. Southern Chu. Then no wonder. The Earth God of Jiangjin suddenly nodded with a look of understanding. Because of the layout of the geomancy in that city, it's very easy to form some areas of darkness. It's not incomprehensible for the ghosts there to mutate. Is that so? The last time I went there with Xiao Jingyi, I didn't see anything special. Su Shinxing scratched his head in puzzlement. Those ghosts probably got lucky and didn't run into you. The Earth God lowly yawned. Also, Lord Aoli has recently become the chief engineer and is commanding the subway construction team over there. He plans to improve the feng shui there. Speaking of which, Brother Long did seem to have studied civil engineering in a human university. Could it be that you had long wanted to do this kind of thing? Su Shinxing thought. However, when he thought about that person's tragic experience, he still felt that the other party probably didn't have such foresight and was just lucky. So you're still planning to go to Southern Chu to find the murderer? Do you want to obtain a body so you can interfere with reality? After figuring out the other party's background, Su Shinxing asked the same question again. If it can really be done, it should be able to complete our obsessions and allow us all to go to the afterlife. The lowly ghost lowered her head and said in an unusually sorrowful voice, but unfortunately, this is impossible. Su Shinxing and Song Yu both showed puzzled expressions. The Earth God lowly's little head nodded, as if she had already begun to doze off. Because by the time we regain our self-awareness, the murderer will have already died of old age. That's possible. Song Yu opened her eyes wide and said in surprise. Dying of old age is still possible. Even Su Shinxing, who was always calm in the face of change, couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth twice because of the other party's unexpected response. Actually, this isn't anything strange. Ghosts are the dregs of humans. They don't have organs such as brains and almost only have instincts. If they want to regain their self-awareness and the ability to think, they need a large amount of energy and the accumulation of time. The Earth God lowly, who seemed to have already fallen asleep, suddenly opened her mouth and said, for such a complicated existence like her, the process of regaining her rationality probably took more than 10 years. If the culprit is already very old, then it's normal for her to die during this period of time. Then how can the current you be reincarnated? Su Shinxing stared at the ghost lowly, then raised his fist and said, don't tell me you still have to use spiritual expiation, physical expiation? Please don't. The ghost lowly immediately begged for mercy pitifully. Actually, we still have some obsessions that we want to complete. What? Su Shinxing began to blow air on his fist. The 20 people's wishes are not the same, but basically they all want to try hamburgers, play games, and so on. The ghost lowly weakly replied. Why is it this kind of wish? Song you couldn't help but be curious. Because we were killed when we were very young. Many people have never eaten delicious food, never played with the toys they wanted to play with. We just want to do some things that we didn't have time to do when we were alive. The ghost lowly's voice became softer and softer, and her attitude became more and more dejected. At the end, she cautiously raised her head slightly, looking at Su Shinxing and the others through her bangs like a timid animal. Then she immediately lowered her eyes and asked in a small voice, can't I? In the next moment, Song Yu hugged her. Because the action was too sudden, the lowly ghost let out a mournful cry. Careful, I've decided. I'll be the one to send this little guy to the afterlife. Then she said to Su Xinxing, do you need my help? Su Xinxing shook his casserole-sized fist. Physical. I want to fulfill their wishes and complete their obsessions. The girl ignored Su Xinxing's joke and only said seriously. She stared into Su Xinxing's eyes, pausing after each word. You'll help me, right? Okay, if you don't need me to pay for it. In the end, Su Xinxing could only admit defeat under her clear gaze and let out a long sigh. Yeah. The victorious song you made a peace sign above the ghost Loli's head and revealed a beautiful smile like a rose. Super Administrative Office. Justice, what are you looking at? Fong Xiaoqing, who had finished patrolling, returned to the office and found that Xiao Zhengyi, who had been sweeping the streets, dealing with supernatural traces, was already sitting in his seat, looking at something. It's nothing, just some newspaper clippings I made in the past. Xiao Zhengyi closed the notebook with the yellowed newspaper clippings and smiled at his partner. Hey, you've made newspaper clippings before? Fong Xiaoqing, who was hanging her hat on the hat rack, couldn't help but be interested. Yeah, I made it a long time ago. Whenever I feel a bit bored or tired from work, I'll take it out and look at it. It reminds me not to forget my original intention of becoming a police officer. Xiao Zhengyi replied. Original intention? Can you tell me about it? Fong Xiaoqing, who was making tea, casually asked. That was about 10 years ago when I was still living in southern Chu. Xiao Zhengyi hesitated for a moment and then slowly said, at that time, I had a younger sister who was 6 years younger than me. Her name was Xiao Ruoying. Chapter 610. This wasn't a complicated or bizarre story. On the border of southern Chu, in a village near a mountain forest, there once lived an ordinary family. The master and mistress of the house ran a small store. Thanks to the help of the villagers, the business of the small store was quite prosperous. Perhaps because they had more to live on after the couple had a son, they paid a fine and had a second child, a daughter, when their son was 6 years old. It was different from when they had a son. At that time, the culture was more liberal, and names didn't need to be read and specific. As a result, their daughter's name was Ruo Ying, which felt like two completely different styles from her brother's name. Although this is a digression, my old man once wanted to name me Jiang Wo, but because there were already 7 or 8 people named Jiang Wo in the village at that time, my old man changed it to Justice. The older brother was very jealous of his younger sister. When he was young, his parents were busy every day because they hadn't even started a business, often leaving him alone at home. But after his younger sister was born, because the family business was on the right track, his parents often took time out to take care of his younger sister. This made the boy feel that his younger sister not only enjoyed treatment he had never enjoyed before, but also took away his parents' love and care. As a result, he disliked his younger sister very much. But for some reason, the boy's younger sister often liked to stick to her older brother. When they were children, his younger sister would often run around behind her older brother. At night, she would often clamor to sleep with her older brother. Even if she got something to eat or play with, she would immediately share it with her older brother. That boy was also an idiot. He had clearly already imperceptibly accepted his younger sister, but he still said that he disliked her. 10 years passed, and the 6-year-old boy became a 16-year-old youth. Because he had started school a year earlier than his peers, he was about to face one of the turning points of his life, the college entrance exam. At that time, the youth's dream was to become a scholar in the field of mathematics, physics, and chemistry. In addition, as the eldest son of the family, his parents had high expectations for him. As a result, his goal was set very high, and he wanted to enter one of the top universities in the country. Naturally, this high goal also brought with it an extraordinary pressure to study. Because of the pressure, the originally outgoing and cheerful youth gradually became depressed and locked himself in the house. Even his temper began to become somewhat surly. Even so, his 10-year-old sister was always by his side. Now that he thought about it, when he was at his loneliest and had to bear the pressure brought by his parents' expectations, it was such a happy thing to have someone to accompany him. Because she couldn't help her brother with anything, at least she had to accompany him. Her sister was so gentle and considerate. Unfortunately, the youth at that time did not realize this. He was selfish and only cared about his own pain, only his own feelings. Finally, one day, he couldn't remember the English words in his mind no matter how hard he tried. He was so anxious that he vented his anger on the little girl who was quietly reading a picture book. He thought that it was the little girl who distracted him and made him unable to memorize the words. So annoying. I hate you. She even said such outrageous words because of her hot-headedness. Even now, the young man could still remember how the girl hugged the book and left the room sobbing under his scolding. Instead of saying that she was sad because she was scolded, it was more like she was sad because she had been betrayed. After the girl left, the uneasiness in his conscience made it even harder for the youth to concentrate on his revision. The summer cicadas on the tree outside the window kept repeating their dry and ear-piercing chirps. Before air conditioners were popularized, even the air blown out by electric fans was hot. The steamer-like environment made the youth's emotions even more chaotic. In the end, he put down the revision materials in his hands and went out to look for his sister. But after searching for a long time, he still couldn't find her. In the evening, he thought maybe she's already home, and I'll apologize to her at night, and returned home. However, he and his parents waited at home until very late, but his sister still didn't come back. The girl went missing. After that, his parents spent a lot of effort to find her. They called the police and mobilized the villagers to help search for her. The youth also threw the college entrance exam aside and searched for his sister in the wilderness over and over again. Then, on the third day after she went missing, the youth found his sister's body in a field that he had already searched many times. The body, the body, the body. Xiao Jingyi's voice choked when he said this. Fang Xiaoqing looked at him strangely and found that his face was twisted in pain. Even by his side, she could feel the great sadness and unwillingness. Fang Xiaoqing clenched her teeth and reached out to hug Xiao Jingyi. It's okay. It's all in the past. It's okay if you don't talk about it. She gently patted his back and felt his body gradually relax as she comforted him softly. No, I've been holding it in for 10 years. Just let me say it. Xiao Jingyi didn't break free from her embrace. Instead, he continued to speak in a posture that would 100% be seen as a public display of affection. When I found her deformed corpse, she was clutching a 4-leaf clover tightly in her hand. That kind of cruel scene even made the police officers who heard the news retch, but they couldn't find the murderer. From then on, I changed my ambition and chose to apply for the police academy. My sister's revenge will be taken by me. Looks like you succeeded. No, I failed. When I graduated from the police academy and contacted my friend who was working there, I found out that the murderer who killed my sister was a lonely old man who had committed serial murders. Moreover, the case was solved not because of an investigation, but because the old man was too old and died of old age in his sleep. When his body started to rot, it was discovered by someone. When the police cleaned up the scene, they found evidence that he had committed crimes and confirmed this point. At this point, Fang Xiaoqing felt Xiao Jingyi's body tremble slightly. I can't accept it. How could that kind of person leave so peacefully? Why didn't I catch that guy and let my sister rest in peace? If I didn't chase Ruoying away, maybe this wouldn't have happened. That child suffered such painful treatment. She must have hated me until her death. From then on, I decided that no matter what, I would never let my name down. Even if I had to risk my life, I wouldn't let my tragedy happen to others. Xiao Jingyi's voice sounded a bit depressed. Was he crying? This was the first time Fang Xiaoqing had seen Xiao Jingyi so weak. Although he couldn't be compared to the one in Sakura's apartment, Xiao Jingyi wouldn't back down even when facing supernatural creatures that were far beyond human beings. After Su Feng and the others were transferred, he took up the role of Jiang Jin's super administrator and ran around the city all day long. It wasn't because there was an invincible expert behind him. Even if there wasn't the one in Sakura's apartment, Xiao Jingyi wouldn't turn a blind eye to those demons and monsters who committed crimes. In the recent incident, he had even suffered a life-threatening injury. But even so, Xiao Jingyi still didn't think of quitting the super administrator and becoming an ordinary person. In fact, Feng Xiaoqing had always felt that Xiao Jingyi's bravery had exceeded the scope of ordinary people. It had even reached the point where he gave up on himself and didn't care even if he died. Now that she thought about it, this bravery probably didn't come from that invincible existence, but from his unwillingness and sadness because he couldn't save his sister. Chapter 6:11. A pair of spicy chicken wings, a red bean pie, and a glass of Coke. Is that all? A large order of fries, a New Orleans roasted chicken burger, and a glass of orange juice. Oh, just order. A mashed potato, a rock-roasted seaweed chicken and rice set, and vegetable soup. Can you really finish all of that? Give me a family bucket too. Hey. Su Xinxing reached out and grabbed the lowly ghost who was still randomly ordering at the counter like grabbing a little chick. Don't order so much just because you're not paying for it. Can't I? The little girl's eyes were filled with tears, and her body was trembling. That pitiful look made it seem like she was about to cry at any moment. Suddenly, the surrounding people's gazes of, "Look, that Baldy is abusing the child. Should we take a picture and post it on the internet? Oh my God, why is my picture blurred?" And so on pierced Su Xinxing's heart. Seeing this, Song Yu could only laugh dryly and take out his phone to pay for the lowly ghost. Then the three of them took their trays and hid in a corner of the restaurant. As soon as they sat down, the lowly ghost happily picked up the chicken drumstick and started eating it in big bites. Although Emily could also eat a lot, but most of the time when she was eating, her behavior was quite gentle. Most of the people who were with her could only feel a gust of cold wind, and then the food on their plates disappeared. But the little girl still sat upright. In comparison, the lowly ghost was more like a gluttonous little brat from a well-educated family. Speaking of which, it's just shopping and eating. Is this really useful? Su Xinxing supported his chin and asked discontentedly. In fact, Kaifeng Restaurant was not the first restaurant they had visited. They had already swept through most of the food stores on this commercial street. And the body that the lowly ghost was using now was made by Jiang Jin's earth god through some kind of spell using clay. According to the earth god himself, this ritual, which imitated the process of Nuwa creating humans, could be made into a carrier that was most in line with the concept of human in the Eastern magic system. If it was only used for a day, it would be almost no different from the body of a real person. After doing all this, the earth god turned back into the original abandoned lowly. After waving her hand and saying that she would leave everything to Su Xinxing, she disappeared with a whoosh. Why don't you let me help you release your soul? It must be useful. Shivering, the lowly ghost answered resolutely. I feel that I'm 21 grams lighter. Maybe it's 35 grams. You've already eaten more than 35 grams, right? Hey. Su Xinxing complained with an embarrassed expression. In short, Ruoying, if you have any feelings, you must tell us. Okay? Song Yu also instructed with concern. Although the lowly ghost's body seemed to be formed by many ghosts glued together, because the name she first reported was Xiao Ruoying, Su Xinxing and the others still called her by this name. Okay. The little girl hurriedly nodded. After eliminating the small mountain of food, the three of them continued to wander the streets of Jiangjin. Interestingly, although the lowly ghost had eaten a lot, her stomach was still flat, and they did not know where the food had gone. Ah, a movie! I want to watch it. After seeing the advertisement board erected by a cinema on the business street, the lowly ghost began to shout excitedly. When you were alive, ahem. Have you never watched a movie before? Song Yu asked curiously. I've watched a tunnel war. The lowly ghost answered happily. It's so old. Su Xinxing and Song Yu cursed in their hearts. But at that time, there was a projectionist uncle who brought a machine to the grain field in the village, set up a white curtain, and played the movie. Every time that happened, we would carry chairs to the grain field to watch the movie. The lowly ghost showed a nostalgic expression. Although we were very happy at that time, the projectionist uncle told us that the real movie was played on a bigger screen, and it looked very good. Su Xinxing showed a look of understanding. He had heard his classmates in the countryside talk about similar things, but the scene they described was when he was young. It seemed that Xiao Ruoying's death should have been quite a long time ago. So, we've long wanted to see a real movie in a big city. The lowly ghost did not notice Su Xinxing's expression and was only thinking about the regrets she had when she was alive. Song Yu naturally agreed to this. She took the lowly ghost, grabbed Su Xinxing's arm, and went to buy tickets together. The movie told the story of a bear cub's experience in a big city. Although there were not many thrilling places, it was heartwarming and could be considered a good recent translation. Clearly, it was the lowly ghost's first time watching this kind of movie. Even after leaving the theater, she walked between Su Xinxing and Song Yu, holding their hands, and excitedly told the movie's plot. From an outsider's point of view, this scene looked like a young parent with a child. But when walking on the road, Su Xinxing suddenly felt his scalp go numb, and involuntarily looked across the road. In the end, he saw Emily, who for some reason had a bucket of popcorn on his head, staring at him with a gaze that said, "I didn't expect you to be this kind of landlord." Su Xinxing guiltily let go of the lowly ghost's hand. "Hey, isn't that Emily?" Song Yu also noticed Su Xinxing's gaze, and looked over to see Emily, who was obediently waiting for the green light at the zebra crossing. Then the green light lit up, and Emily expressionlessly appeared in front of Su Xinxing. It was clearly a very strange scene, but the surrounding pedestrians acted like they didn't see anything, minding their own business or looking at their phones, turning a blind eye to the strange scene in front of them. Cough. "There's a reason for this, Emily. Let me explain. Simply put, this and that happened." "Oh, this and that, so there's no way to explain it." Emily crossed his arms and expressionlessly nodded. This action made the bucket of popcorn on his head wobble, making people worry that it would fall at any time. Wait a minute. How is this exchange established? Unlike Song Yu, who vaguely knew that there was some kind of connection between old Su and Emily, the lowly ghost who witnessed the whole process couldn't help but ask, "Why can it be understood just by saying this and that?" Emily calmly looked at the lowly ghost for a moment, and then a slightly stunned expression appeared on his quiet little face. "That's right, say it. Don't think it's strange after I pointed it out. Do you want to eat popcorn?" Emily took the bucket of popcorn off his head and handed it to the lowly. "Isn't the change in topic a little too much? Although I want to eat. Popcorn is a good civilization, say it." And so the two lolas, who looked about the same age, shared the popcorn scene, making Su Xinxing involuntarily squint his eyes. "Lulakan?" Song Yu, who was observing Su Xinxing from the side, suddenly said, "No, I just feel that Emily is unexpectedly friendly to that little guy." It wasn't that Su Xinxing wanted to clear his name of being a Lulakan, but he really felt that it was a bit strange. Rather than saying that Emily was afraid of strangers, it was better to say that he had no interest in ordinary people. Naturally, he wouldn't have normal interactions, and his behavior in school was quite cold. Only when he had interacted with people like Song Yu, Cui Yingying, and Qin Xingyan for a period of time and got along well with them, would Emily show his friendliness, which was the stupid lowly side. So when he saw that Emily actually took the initiative to talk to the other party, Su Xinxing was shocked. Usually, when Emily saw things like vengeful spirits, he would probably cheer expressionlessly, and then swallow them in one gulp. According to him, the taste was very cool, better than ice cream. Could it be that he wanted to try a new taste this time, so he planned to fatten the other party up before eating it? No matter what, it was better to be friendly than to directly swallow the other party. So Su Xinxing's group continued to fool around with the lowly ghost. After walking around the business district, they went to a small amusement park that was built not long ago in the outskirts of Jiangjin. They rode the roller coaster and Ferris wheel, scared the staff to tears in the haunted house, and easily scored the highest score ever for entertainment like shooting. But during the whole process, Emily's face was calm, unswervingly sandwiched between Su Xinxing and the lowly ghost. Because of this, even Song Yu could only smile bitterly. When they left the amusement park, it was close to dusk. When the magnificent burning clouds disappeared into the western sky, the sky finally gradually darkened. And they also went to the mountain behind Jiangjin University that overlooked half of Jiangjin. Standing on the abandoned observation deck, looking at the sparkling lights at the foot of the mountain not far away, the lowly ghost held the railing of the observation deck with both hands. Half of her body was leaning out, as if she wanted to imprint the scene in front of her into her mind. "How do you feel?" Su Shenxing opened his mouth to break the silence. "I'm really happy today." The lowly ghost jumped from the railing back to the observation deck. "Ruoying." Song Yu looked a bit reluctant. Mo Li had the same expression as before, silently looking at the other party. The lowly ghost smiled. She turned her head, her gaze lingering on Su Shenxing's group for a moment. The moon that had just risen was like a huge white jade plate, becoming the background of the gentle girl. A holy and mysterious aura filled the air. The girl was like an immortal in the moon, hazy and illusory, but it made people yearn for her. Perhaps at this moment, people would believe that she was the real moon god. Although we can't remember the past clearly, but we've all been treated excessively, we have an instinctive fear of the world, and are even afraid of starting a new life. This is probably why we can't reincarnate. But I didn't think that we would be treated so gently after death. The lowly ghost bowed to Su Shenxing's group. "Thank you for believing our words, for believing that our past lives weren't fake. Thank you for helping us so much, allowing us to be freed from our long suffering. Thank you for allowing us to regain our faith and longing for this world. This way, we should have the courage to go to the lost and unknown world of reincarnation." Tiny specks of light began to fly out from the lowly ghost's body, like fireflies in the wilderness in summer. In this cold night, they were like stars dancing around the little girl, like a dream. "If you don't mind us ghosts giving our blessings, we wish you a beautiful future. A future where you can be so happy every day." Ruoying. Song Yu lowered her head, her expression somewhat sad. They had only known each other for a day, but it seemed like she liked her. Finally, with a cold wind in the winter night, those specks of light began to float, and finally disappeared into the winter night sky. Following the disappearance of the light, the girl's body was like an empty shell that gradually lost its soul, and slowly sat down on the ground. Su Shenxing looked at Mo Li, and the latter nodded his head. It seemed like he was right. After those wraiths washed away their resentment and stubbornness, they were like ordinary souls, gradually disappearing and going to the place they should go to. "Mo Li, take back that body," Su Shenxing ordered Mo Li. Mo Li stuck his tongue out at him. He sighed, hesitated for a moment, and then put his right hand on Song Yu's shoulder. "Let's go back." The sorrowful girl nodded, and then leaned into Su Shenxing's embrace. At that moment, the girl who seemed to have become an empty shell suddenly moved. This gave Su Shenxing a fright, and Song Yu also felt Su Shenxing's movement and raised her head blankly. In the end, he saw the lowly ghost stiffly shaking her head. "Ruoying," she shouted in surprise, and wanted to run towards her, but was stopped by Su Shenxing. "Who are you?" Su Shenxing asked. "I'm Xiao Ruoying." The ghost lowly tried to stand up, but her movements looked like those of a paraplegic who had just regained a bit of feeling in her limbs. Saying that she was clumsy was already a compliment. "I don't know what's going on, but everyone has left, only I'm still here." Hearing her say this, Su Shenxing looked at Mo Li, and the latter nodded vigorously like before. At that moment, Xiao Ruoying finally stood up, but before she could take the first step, her whole body fell forward. Luckily, she was caught by Mo Li. "Thank you, Mo Li." She first thanked Mo Li, then looked at Su Shenxing and said, "I think it's because my wish hasn't been fulfilled yet." "What wish?" Song Yu asked. "Shenxing and I will definitely help you think of a way. I'm sorry that..." The other party's face was bitter. "I can't remember." Walking on the streets of Jiangjin, Xiao Ruoying tried her best to control her pace. However, from an outsider's point of view, her movements were like a robot's dance. Her movements were stiff and gave off a strange vibe. Although Su Shenxing said that he could carry her, the girl stubbornly insisted on walking by herself, and believed that as long as she walked more, she would be able to recover faster. This made Su Shenxing subconsciously want to say, "It's not like you're doing rehabilitation." But in the end, he held it in and didn't say it. He guessed that the reason why she suddenly became like this was because the other wraiths had all disappeared, leaving Xiao Ruoying alone. Naturally, her own soul power had greatly weakened, and the body that she could control as easily as an extension of her arm had now become extremely difficult and heavy. "Landlord, I smell roasted sweet potatoes." At that moment, Emily suddenly pulled on Su Shunxing's clothes. "If you want to eat, say it. Roasted sweet potatoes. That's great. I remember that my family used to grow sweet potatoes. Even, who did I roast sweet potatoes with?" Xiao Ruoying said excitedly at first, but after saying a few words, she became confused because of her broken memory. She frowned and tried hard to recall that memory. "Don't try so hard to think about such small things. Oh right, maybe you'll remember after eating the roasted sweet potatoes." "Emily, where's the roasted sweet potato stall?" Song Yu first comforted her, then turned her head to ask Emily. "On the street 12 kilometers away," Emily answered without hesitation. "Your nose is quite good." Song Yu, who had been infected by Su Shunxing's tendency to complain, couldn't help but say with an embarrassed face, "I'll go buy it with Emily." Su Shunxing measured Song Yu's physique and felt that she might not be able to withstand a normal high-speed train, so he simply planned to bring along Emily for navigation and buy it. "There's a public bench here. You and Xiao Ruoying can sit for a while. We'll be right back." "Okay, do you have money?" "I still have money to buy sweet potatoes. Or rather, I've been treated by you for the whole day. At least let me treat you to something like this." Su Shunxing couldn't help but smile bitterly. "Then I'll have to trouble you." Song Yu smiled gently at Su Shunxing. "Come back soon." Of course. Su Shunxing put Emily on his waist, winked at Song Yu, and then disappeared. Song Yu smiled helplessly at the place where Su Shunxing disappeared, then helped Xiao Ruoying to the bench and wiped her sweat. "Sister Song Yu, how did you meet that person?" Xiao Ruoying rested for a while and asked Song Yu curiously. It's a long story." Song Yu couldn't help but think about where to start. When she had just finished thinking about what to say and was about to say it, she found that the girl she was supporting was looking at the sidewalk in front of the bench with her eyes wide open. Song Yu subconsciously looked in that direction and found a young man standing there. She knew him. "Officer Justice?" Song Yu called out softly. If it was in the past, Xiao Jingyi would probably laugh and ridicule her for calling him a chinibyu. But today, Xiao Jingyi didn't pay attention to her. He just looked at the girl behind her with a wavering expression that she had never seen before. "Ruoying?" He whispered the girl's name with a trembling voice. Then, Song Yu felt a considerable force coming from her hand. The pale-faced Xiao Ruoying broke free from her hand and stumbled into the back alley. "Wait, Ruoying." Song Yu couldn't stop the girl in time. She hurriedly turned around and looked at the police officer who was trembling slightly, as if he had lost all his energy. Seeing that she couldn't count on him, she couldn't help but stomp her feet and chase after Xiao Ruoying. Seeing the other person's figure disappear into the alley, Xiao Zhengyi painfully knelt on the ground. When he saw the other person running away without hesitation when she saw him, the regret and grief that he thought he would never experience again hit his heart. "Am I dreaming?" His face had lost all color, and his expression was twisted from great pain. His lips were bleeding because he had bitten them. As expected, "She still hates me." Chapter 6:12. Nanyang was a small city located in the south of Jiangjin. It was also the location of the Bailu Temple branch. At this time, at the entrance of a 3-story detached villa in the luxurious villa district of South Sea City, 2 strong men wearing sunglasses and black suits, the only thing missing was the word bodyguard written on their faces, were looking suspiciously at a girl in white who had just arrived. "Are you the Taoist master mentioned by the head of the Bailu Temple?" One of the bodyguards, who looked slightly older, asked. It wasn't because of his occupational disease or his paranoia, but because the girl in front of him was too young, and her appearance was too elegant and beautiful. If he didn't know that his employer didn't have any other appointments today, he would have thought that this girl was invited to keep him company. And to be honest, his employer's mistresses, who were usually quite attractive, couldn't even beat her in terms of beauty if they were doubled in value. But the girl didn't seem to want to talk to them. She just glanced at the two bodyguards indifferently. Under normal circumstances, 3 to 5 strong men couldn't even get close to her. But the two bodyguards suddenly felt as if their bodies had turned into stone sculptures. They were so stiff that they couldn't even move a finger. Then the girl floated forward, ignoring the solid and heavy security door and directly passing through it. When the corner of her pure white clothes disappeared from the door, the two bodyguards finally regained their freedom. They heaved a sigh of relief as if they had been granted amnesty. Then, they looked at each other tacitly and reached out to touch the security door, wanting to see if their employer had installed a fake security door. Putting aside the two bodyguards' obscenity towards the security door, the young man who was sitting on the luxurious sofa in the villa's living room was also shocked by the girl's performance of passing through the wall. His whole body froze as he stared blankly at her. "I'm a true disciple of the Bailu Temple, the new Taoist master, Qin Xingyan. Are you the client this time, Mr. Zhang?" The young girl's beautiful yet ethereal voice finally brought the young man back to his senses. He looked at the girl's face with some infatuation, then quickly lowered his head, probably afraid that his actions would offend her. This was also the reason why Qin Xingyan started the performance right from the beginning. Based on her previous exorcism experience, she knew that because of her age and appearance, it was easy for clients to look down on her or even have strange thoughts about her. After that, it would be very troublesome to dispel this prejudice. So, recently, before she started, she had to show her power to the clients first so that they would be in awe of her. This was the only way to save herself from all the messy matters. "Yes, that thing is there," the young man answered respectfully. The young man replied respectfully, and when he got to the point, he couldn't help but shudder. Then he pointed the there he mentioned to Qin Xingyan. It was a solid wooden door covered with apricot talismans. No, instead of saying that the door was covered with talismans, it was more accurate to say that the walls of the room behind the door were covered with talismans. There were more talismans at the entrance and exit of the wooden door. The evil sealing talisman of the Zhengyi sect. Qin Xingyan just glanced at it and roughly understood. These talismans were not fake. They were the real deal that had the effect of restraining evil spirits. Judging from the extravagance of the talismans and the residual spiritual power on the talismans, the person who cast the evil sealing talisman should be a famous big shot in the Zhengyi sect. However, the talisman was different from the usual situation. This time, the evil sealing talisman of the Zhengyi sect was not used to exterminate the evil spirit, but only to imprison it in that room. Taoist master really has a sharp eye. Those are the talismans pasted by Taoist master Xianqing of the Zhengyi sect. While the young man was sincerely convinced, he tried to do something that he had almost never done in his life. Usually, it was others who flattered him. Did the person in the Zhengyi sect say what was inside? No, the Taoist master only said that it was a rare kind of resentful spirit. Its resentment was so strong that even he could do nothing about it. Qin Xingyan did not intend to listen to him in detail. She just waved her small hand and the talismans pasted on the door flew away. Then, under the young man's warning, she went through the wall again. However, it was different this time. As soon as Qin Xingyan entered the sealed storage room, she felt an obvious drop in temperature. If the outside was just a normal winter's cold, then the inside of the room was even colder than an ice cellar. It was almost to the extent that a glass of water would turn into ice when it fell to the ground. However, the most terrifying thing in this room was not the coldness. It was the twisted and profane evil existence that was invisible to the naked eye but very clear in Qin Xingyan's eyes. It was like a carpet of flesh, organs, eyeballs, and teeth that almost spread to the entire room's walls, floor, and ceiling. From the moment she entered the room, these strange existences had already evolved into tentacle-like things that swept towards her from all directions. If it was in the past, Qin Xingyan might have been flustered. However, she had now transcended the category of mortals and became an existence that resembled a celestial being. "How dare you?" She only snorted coldly, and those tentacles shrank back at an even faster speed as if they had been scalded by boiling oil. Then, those indescribable twisted things began to make blasphemous sounds that could make ordinary people lose their minds. It was as if hundreds of hands were scratching a blackboard with their nails. Hundreds of pieces of foam plastic were rubbing against each other, and many people were screaming before they died. Even if one covered one's ears, it was useless because these maddening sounds would directly sound in one's mind. Noisy! Qin Xingyan frowned and scolded. Suddenly, the whole world fell silent. Those strange things made a hissing sound like a balloon leaking air and then calmed down. Perhaps they were a little anxious that they could not take down Qin Xingyan with their best trick. The carpet of flesh, organs, eyeballs, and teeth began to swell, as if they wanted to directly squeeze Qin Xingyan to death. However, Qin Xingyan was faster than them. She had already thoroughly figured out the other party's background. They seem strong, but in reality, they have only lost their minds and instinctively want to attack the living. They are a collection of vengeful spirits that have completely turned into monsters. How pitiful! Let me be here and set you free. She summoned her celestial sword, Red Sleeves. After becoming a celestial being, she had sacrificially refined the V1.02 version and strengthened it. With just one slash, she turned those things into ashes. After receiving the payment from Mr. Zhang, Qin Xingyan took the high-speed rail back to Jiangjin. Although he could fly, he had been helping the Bailu Temple deal with business issues for the past 2 days. Even though he had become a celestial being and his body was always at its peak, the accumulated mental fatigue could not be resolved. In order to prevent himself from falling halfway and hitting someone, Qin Xingyan finally decided to take the high-speed rail. Anyway, the fare could be reimbursed by the Bailu Temple. Less than half an hour's ride was within the acceptable range. Yes, this time it was also a strange combination of vengeful spirits. However, just like the previous few times, the vengeful spirit that was the bond of the combination could not withstand the power of the other vengeful spirits and has been demonized. In the car, Qin Xingyan took the time to make a phone call to the Bailu Temple branch to report the situation. Including this time, we have dealt with a total of 4 similar cases recently. To be honest, Senior Marshal Brother, I don't think this can be considered a coincidence. The secular disciples of the Bailu Temple in the police station have also confirmed that there seem to be a few cases of disappearances recently. However, most of them were homeless people, so it did not cause too much of a stir. However, the police station has already started to investigate. Wait a minute. I just received a message from Grandmaster Black Pigeon's flying sword. Yes, Grandmaster Black Pigeon spends most of his time in the sex library, so he does not know how to use a mobile phone. According to his investigation, someone might be using an evil technique to possess someone's body. Possess someone's body? Qin Xingyan was stunned. It was not that she did not know what possession meant, but the other party had caused such a big commotion that even the secular government was alarmed. It was a little strange that it was only for possession. That's right. However, considering that evil cultivators usually do not cause such a big commotion when they possess someone's body, Grandmaster Black Pigeon guessed that the other party was not a cultivator, but an ordinary person who had obtained this evil technique. Those vengeful spirits and evil spirits should be the byproduct of the evil technique. An ordinary person, it's a little hard to imagine that he would kill so many people just for the sake of possession. Qin Xingyan felt that it was a little hard to accept. It's probably to prolong his life. I know that some people are willing to do anything in order to live a long life. Moreover, from the fact that the other party had created so many vengeful spirits and evil spirits, I'm afraid that his evil technique has not succeeded yet. It should be missing some key factors. For example, as a sacrifice, it requires a certain person's birthday and so on. Then, based on the location of the evil spirits and evil spirits, it is very likely that the other party has gone to Jiangjin. Oh, then his luck is really bad. Qin Xingyan immediately relaxed. Yes, I think so too. Judging from the voice of the old man sitting opposite him, it was obvious that he was also worried. After all, there was an existence in Jiangjin that even the Bailu Temple did not dare to provoke. Soon, the high-speed train arrived at Jiangjin Station. Qin Xingyan squeezed through the exit while talking on the phone. As a result, when he was going up the stairs, he accidentally bumped into a man wearing a thick cotton-padded coat and a hat on his head. He was wrapped up tightly and had a strong smell of cologne on him. Sorry. Qin Xingyan apologized to the other party and continued to walk forward. But after a moment, she stopped again and muttered softly, "You're right. It can't be that coincidental, right?" Then she immediately turned around, but there was no way for her to find that person in the crowd. Chapter 613. Why are they all gone? When Su Xinxing carried Emoli, who was nibbling on sweet potatoes like a hamster nibbling on melon seeds, he found that there was no one there. Is it because I didn't tell them to stay here and don't move before I left? He didn't think that Song Yu and the others would encounter any danger. First of all, Jiangjin's public security was pretty good, and it wasn't a deserted place, so there shouldn't be any criminals. Second of all, the Mirage Pearl on Song Yu's body wasn't purely for decoration. If they encountered any danger, the ones who would be pitted were most likely those criminals. As for supernatural beings such as monsters, they were much more well-behaved under Su Xinxing's iron fist. The monsters in Jiangjin had almost become model citizens who were more law-abiding than mortals, so there shouldn't be anyone foolish enough to come here and cause trouble. Just as this thought popped up in his mind, his phone rang. Su Xinxing released his hand, and Emily's long golden hair danced as if it had a life of its own, firmly grabbing onto old Su Xinxing's body. Su Xinxing also let the little girl hang onto him like a koala bear. He took out his phone from his pocket and found that the call was from Qin Xingyan. "Hello." He answered the call very casually. "What's up?" After a while, the slightly frivolous smile on his face gradually disappeared, and his brows slightly furrowed. "Shit. There really are people coming here to cause trouble?" After hanging up the phone, he grimaced with a slight headache. "If I knew this would happen, I would have let the spirit ghost follow them." Su Xinxing patted Molly on his back. "Stop eating. Come down and get ready to work." Holding a paper bag full of sweet potatoes, Emily reluctantly jumped down from his back. The little guy stuffed the bag of sweet potatoes into Su Xinxing's arms, then looked around for a moment and picked up a branch from the ground. Just like that, he poked at the fork in the road ahead. Before the branch could fall, a gust of wind blew it down. Emoli blinked his eyes, then firmly pointed in the direction of the fallen branch. "That's it." "Oh, I understand." Su Xinxing didn't suspect anything. He picked up Emoli and ran in the opposite direction of Song Yu and the others. No. At the foot of the mountain behind Jiangjin University, Xiao Ruoying was constantly searching for something. Her movements were much smoother than before, but there was still a sense of weakness. Huff, huff, huff. Song Yu, who had finally managed to run over, placed his hands on his knees and gasped for air. "Ruoying, what are you looking for? Why aren't there any clover here? My hometown is full of them," Xiao Ruoying asked dejectedly as she looked at the withered shrubs on the ground in disappointment. "Because it's winter now." Song Yu shook his head helplessly, thinking, could it be that the other party has forgotten even this kind of common sense? Is there no other place to find clover? Xiao Ruoying lowered her head in disappointment. Song Yu, who was finally able to catch his breath, looked at Xiao Ruoying and found that the other party seemed to be really sad because of this. He sighed. If it's in the greenhouse attached to Jiangjin University's Department of Agriculture, there might be 3-leaf clover. Really? Xiao Ruoying's eyes lit up. Because it's a plant that can be used to improve the quality of the soil, there should be some planted, but it's just a possibility. It's better not to have too much hope. It's all right. Please take me there. The ghost girl stared at Song Yu. This might be the reason why I didn't reincarnate. Ah, I don't care if you get caught. Song Yu yelled out in despair. Then, he brought Xiao Ruoying to Jiangjin University's botanical greenhouse. There was a lock on the glass greenhouse, but because there was nothing valuable inside, all the valuable plants were in the laboratory on campus. With a little effort, one could actually crawl in from the ventilation hole on the other side. Sure enough, there was a small patch of white alfalfa inside, which was commonly known as 3-leaf clover. Xiao Ruoying immediately ran inside to look for something. Song Yu had no choice but to take out his phone and use the flashlight mode to illuminate her. It wasn't that there was no light in the greenhouse, but Song Yu felt that sneaking in to steal things was already too much, and turning on the light was a bit too arrogant. Ruoying, what are you looking for? But Xiao Ruoying didn't answer, and just continued to look around the patch of grass. After a while, the ghost girl suddenly let out a small cry of joy. Found it! Song Yu subconsciously looked over, and found that the girl was holding a 4-leaf clover, which was a 3-leaf clover with 4 leaves. If you said you were looking for this earlier, I could have come to help you, she muttered softly, and then realized that quite a long time had passed since she started chasing Xiao Ruoying. Just as she was about to give Su Xinxing a call, her phone, which had been in the illumination mode for a long time, turned off automatically due to insufficient battery. It can't be. Song Yu wanted to cry, but no tears came out. She could only bring the ghost girl out of the greenhouse, and then move forward in the dark behind the mountain. Fortunately, although this place was quite far from her apartment, it wasn't too far from Ying's apartment. As long as they went down the mountain, they could reach it by walking for about half an hour. At that time, she could just charge her phone and call Su Xinxing. It wasn't that there weren't any streetlights behind Jiangjin University, but the school probably thought that there shouldn't be anyone at night and that it would save money on electricity. There was only one street light every 100 steps, and it was the type that emitted a faint white light. Sometimes it didn't even feel as bright as moonlight, so it would be strange if they could see the road clearly. But with the help of these street lights and moonlight, they could still see some things, for example, a figure about 1.9 meters tall, standing on the mountain path and blocking Song Yu's path. He was wearing a European-style gentleman's hat, and his entire body was wrapped up tightly. Because the other party appeared without warning, Song Yu, who was caught off guard, was shocked. Mister, probably because of the tailwind, Song Yu had just opened her mouth to speak when she smelled a strong smell of cologne. At the same time, Xiao Ruoying, who was behind her, was almost pressed against her back. Although the girl's body was only made of clay, Song Yu could feel that she was trembling slightly, as if she was afraid of something. She didn't know if it was an illusion, but the girl behind her said in a voice as soft as a mosquito's, "Run." Chapter 6:14. When she was warned by Xiao Ruoying, Song Yu had already noticed the abnormality of the man in front of her. In a sense, she was already used to this kind of development. Without hesitation, she turned around and ran up the mountain with Xiao Ruoying in her arms. As expected, the man behind her chased after her. Even if one had never climbed a mountain before, anyone who had walked up the stairs should know very well that running to a high place was a considerable test of one's physical strength and endurance. Although Song Yu often went in and out of Ying's apartment, she was still a mortal after all. Even if she had the Mirage Pearl to improve her physique, she was at most a little better than an ordinary person. Not to mention that she was holding a heavy Xiao Ruoying now. Not long after, she could already smell the heavy cologne behind her, as well as a hint of rotten meat hidden under the smell. Ruoying, when we reach the fork in the road later, we each run in one direction. No matter who that guy is chasing, the other one quickly go to Ying's apartment and inform the people there. Understand? Song Yu, who knew that this couldn't go on, immediately made a decision. Xiao Ruoying nodded obediently in her arms. At this time, because the streetlights were too dim, Song Yu couldn't see clearly under her feet. Suddenly, she twisted and fell to the ground with Xiao Ruoying. By the time she turned around, the man was already pouncing on them. Bang! A gunshot rang out in the quiet night sky. Black blood spurted out of the man's head. Then, his whole body was tilted by the force of the bullet, and he staggered a few steps and fell by the tree beside the mountain road. "Are you okay?" Xiao Zhengyi, who had rushed over at some point, asked Song Yu and the others with a smoking police pistol in one hand. His eyes were still on Xiao Ruoying for a moment, but considering that Xiao Ruoying might not want to see him, he didn't stay for long. "Be careful. This guy is not dead yet." Song Yu nodded decisively and then stood up. It should be said that Xiao Zhengyi was worthy of being a fierce person who dared to directly shoot a criminal's kidney when he was still in the criminal police force. After he was transferred to the super administrative office and came into contact with all kinds of strange things, he learned that guns were not much of a threat to many things. His actions of shooting became more decisive, and he directly chose the vital parts of the body that could directly kill ordinary people. Of course, it might also have something to do with that guy scaring his sister. Sure enough, even though there was a big hole in his head, the man who was supposed to be a corpse still stood up. His throat made a hee sound like a zombie in a lot of movies. He staggered towards Song Yu and the others who had finally stood up. Xiao Ruoying looked like she wanted to say something to Xiao Zhengyi, whose back was facing her, but Song Yu pulled her behind him to protect her. Xiao Zhengyi, on the other hand, was so focused on the enemy that he didn't notice this. If the gun doesn't work, Xiao Zhengyi stuffed the gun back into its holster and pulled out the broken Yuan Rong sword from his waist pouch. I'll have to trouble you then. You only think of me at times like this. Yuan Rong sword spirit floated to the side and complained. Also, the next time you and Miss Fang Xiaoqing are intimate, I hope you can put me in a place where I can't see the two of you. Is it because you don't want to eat dog food? No, it's just that from my point of view, it's immoral. Although the man and the sword spirit seemed to be chatting, in reality Xiao Zhengyi had already charged towards the enemy. He dodged the enemy's claws and cut off half of the enemy's head along with his right shoulder. Yuan Rong's sword was clearly an old broken sword, but when Xiao Zhengyi chopped down, he felt that it was very light in his hand. It was like a hot butter knife cutting through butter. There wasn't the slightest bit of resistance. If the other side was a living human, then it shouldn't feel like this. This guy really isn't a normal human? Xiao Zhengyi frowned. It's just a normal corpse. As long as you're careful, this kind of thing won't be a threat to you. After doing all this, Xiao Zhengyi turned around and faced Song Yu and Xiao Ruoying. He wanted to say something but hesitated as he looked at his sister. Or rather the girl who looked like his sister. Then his gaze moved to Song Yu, hoping that Song Yu could give him an explanation. Song Yu wanted to say something, but suddenly her expression changed and she shouted, "Behind you! Be careful behind you!" In the next moment, Xiao Zhengyi, who suddenly turned around, felt a foul stench in his face. Although he had subconsciously swung the Yuan Rong sword in his hand, cutting the enemy in half from the chest, he still hadn't fully recovered. However, the other party's upper body was still on his shoulder. Moreover, he opened his mouth and fiercely bit the area between Xiao Zhengyi's neck and right shoulder. Immediately, Xiao Zhengyi's right hand that was holding the Yuan Rong sword fell down powerlessly. Feeling the pain, he viciously swung his left fist at the enemy's body. The 50-cent bracelet +2, wrapped around his hand, immediately showed its effect and directly smashed half of the enemy's body into paste. But blood kept flowing from his neck, and it didn't take long for his clothes to be soaked. "Hey, Sword Master, are you all right?" Yuan Rong Sword's sword spirit asked in a panic. "Officer Xiao, how are you?" Almost at the same time, Song Yu also hurriedly asked. "I'm all right. It's only an injury of this degree. I'll recover very quickly." It must be known that his entire body had suffered extremely serious injuries, and he had even almost been sentenced to death by the doctors. But in the end, he had recovered in just a few days. Although Su Xinqing and the others had secretly helped him, Xiao Zhengyi's miraculous constitution, which had been cultivated in an environment rich in spiritual energy, was also one of the main reasons. If an ordinary person didn't quickly bandage the wound, they might die from excessive blood loss. But to him, it really wasn't a big deal. But this wasn't the main problem at the moment. Although there wasn't enough light, he could still see many shadowy things from the forest below. Moreover, those things were like sharks that had smelled blood and were closing in on them. So that's how it is. These guys are the missing vagrants that were notified by Southern Chu. After carefully examining half of the head on the ground, which was still opening and closing its mouth, Xiao Zhengyi's appearance immediately overlapped with a photo on the list of missing persons that he had seen before. So those vagrants all turned into these things. In short, we can't continue to stay here. We have to leave quickly. Xiao Zhengyi made a prompt decision. But it was basically impossible to go down the mountain. Those things had practically blocked the way down the mountain, Perhaps going around the top of the mountain would have a higher chance of success. Go to the mountainside over there. Song Yu's mind flashed with inspiration. He pointed in a direction and said, I heard Xinxing say that the Earth God lives under the abandoned apartment over there. There won't be a problem if we ask her for help. Chapter 6:15. At the border between Jiangjin and Nanyang, a six-wheeled truck was overturned on the side of the road. The driver of the truck knocked his head on the steering wheel and fainted, except for a slight concussion. There shouldn't be any sequelae or obvious external injuries. The fully enclosed container carriage that was supposed to contain things had been torn in half a few meters away from the bottom of the carriage. That's right, torn. It was as if a monster like Godzilla had directly torn the entire carriage apart from the outside with terrifying strength. What was surprising was that the carriage was empty, as if nothing had been in it before. But in fact, a few minutes ago, there was a cargo in the container. About 3 kilometers away from the site of the incident, there was a crater with a diameter of more than 300 meters in the deserted farmland due to the winter. At the bottom of the crater, there were some remnants of charcoal. These were the only remnants of the cargo left in this world. Su Xinxing stood beside the crater. His right hand was clenched into a fist with white smoke curling up from it. He was talking to Qin Xingyan on the phone. Yes, that's right, it's solved. Although Mo Li pointed in the right direction because the enemy is not in Jiangjin, it took a little more time. Sam? When Mo Li heard her name, she was sitting on a leafless peach tree and eating sweet potatoes. She looked up at Su Xinxing in confusion, but when she realized that he wasn't calling her, she continued to eat sweet potatoes with a happy expression. It should be near Nanyang, right? Sorry if I had thought of it earlier. Although it's a presumptuous request, can you tell me what the enemy looks like? Qin Xingyan seemed to be quite apologetic for not thinking of this earlier. Enemy? You're talking about that kind of thing. I don't think it's worth talking about. Huh? Qin Xingyan sounded a little surprised by Su Xinxing's statement. Indeed, Su Xinxing had invincible power. In Qin Xingyan's knowledge, there had never been an enemy that could be called a match for Su Xinxing. But no matter what kind of enemy it was, the previous Su Xinxing would never express his contempt and disdain so blatantly. Simply put, it looks like a lump of meat that has long lost its human shape. Su Xinxing recalled the disgusting scene he saw when he tore open the container and couldn't help but frown. Before I smashed it, I used the cloud scale to briefly sense and roughly understood what it was. Okay, I'm listening. Although she couldn't see Qin Xingyan's face, she was probably sitting upright and waiting for Su Xinxing's conclusion. That thing probably took over a body that didn't belong to it, but because the soul and body are not compatible, the body can't understand that it's still alive. Well, it's probably in a state of dying for a long time. It belongs to the category above a corpse and below a vegetative state. Living dead? No, it should be a state worse than that. That's right. That thing should also be very aware of its own situation, so it used some method to disrupt the normal metabolism of the body, forcing the body to constantly grow to replace the part that was constantly dying and beginning to rot. But this abnormal growth has obviously been out of control for a long time. So in the end, the internal organs, bones, muscles, and even lymphoid tissues began to gradually lose their human appearance due to the disorderly growth. In the end, that guy became a barely living piece of meat. Although it might be able to live forever under the premise of sufficient nutrients, that's all it is. Without the essence of being a human, it's not impossible to regard it as a piece of meat that simply grew cells. Twisted eternal life. Yes, even the ability to move is completely lost, and the brain has become a strange organization. Maybe even the ability to think has problems, and it can't even be called an enemy. I see. Although a powerful soul itself also has a certain degree of thinking ability, it's just like a healthy soul that resides in a healthy body and a healthy spirit. In fact, the soul will be affected by the body. Is that so? Well, to use an easy-to-understand example, for example, there is a genre called transformation novels in online novels. The general content is that the male protagonist reincarnates or transmigrates into the body of a woman for some reason. Although there are some protagonists who still do things their own way, most of the protagonist's behavior pattern will gradually become closer to that of a woman. This is the typical situation of the body affects the soul. That guy's body has become like this, so his soul is probably also distorted quite seriously. Senior actually has money to read novels. Is it possible that you're reading pirated novels? That's not the point. I still have the money to support the original version. Su Xinxing complained with an embarrassed face. Judging from the fact that he ran away after seeing me, the instincts of the body probably still remain. But that's it. With that kind of broken soul, maintaining that kind of distorted body to carry out instinctive activities is already the limit. Broken soul? Yes, a soul so weak that it's quite pitiful. If the soul of an ordinary person is a bonfire, then the soul lodging in that piece of meat is like a child playing with fireworks. It's so weak that it will go out if you're not careful. Strange? After a moment of silence on the other end of the phone, Qin Xingyan muttered to himself. What's wrong? Su Xinxing couldn't help but ask curiously. Although I 100% believe Senior's words, this conflicts with the information. Conflicts? Because at the beginning, the Bailu Temple learned of the existence of this monster because it killed a considerable number of people, extracted their souls, and carried out some kind of ritual to replace itself with a body. But if this monster's soul is as weak as a candle in the wind as Senior said, can it really do this kind of thing? There's actually such an inside story. Su Xinxing couldn't help but be a little surprised. It seems that I'm thinking too simply. But the monsters he dealt with in Jiangjin were basically monsters, and most of the monsters were quite straightforward because they looked down on humans. Their thinking was basically, I want to be the king of this land, and whoever dares to stop me will be killed. This idea is a bit tricky, but I can't back down, I'll do it. Damn, I can't do it. I'll run away F***ck. I can't run away. I'll be a coward, spare my life. I'll do whatever you say. Senior. What's wrong? I just caught the ghoul controlled by that guy. I have very bad news. What's the situation? That guy seems to have implanted his soul fragments into the ghoul's body. While controlling the ghoul, he also used the ghoul as a base station to form a soul network within a certain distance. And judging from the ghoul's still active situation, that guy isn't dead yet. In other words, we have to annihilate all of those damn things? Su Xinxing's expression couldn't help but twitch, and he muttered regretfully, If I knew, I would have left that guy's corpse intact and used it to cut off the karma line. No, this kind of soul network isn't 4G after all. It takes a long time to upload one soul, and the ghoul's soul fragments have limited capacity. If the other party started uploading when he was attacked by Senior, it would have been absolutely too late. In other words, that monster who pursues immortality, I'm afraid that before Senior attacked his body, he had already found a carrier he liked. TSK. Su Xinxing clicked his tongue unhappily. An ominous premonition spread from the bottom of his heart. Emily, don't eat anymore. Let's go. Where are we going? The little guy tilted his head and asked. Jiangjin. Chapter 6:16. Going to the abandoned apartment where the Earth God lived to seek help was the right choice. But the problem was that Song Yu misjudged the seriousness of the current situation. When they walked up the mountain path, they found that some zombie-like guys had climbed over the ridge and were approaching them from above. This forced Song Yu and the others to give up on going to the Earth God and change their escape route. However, even if they gave up on the mountain path paved with stone slabs and walked in the forest at a steep slope, as long as they stopped to rest for a little longer, they would be able to see shadows appearing around them. Even if they tried their best to shake them off, there was no change at all. It was as if those things that used to be human could sense where Song Yu and the others were. Although they found a deserted pavilion built in the wilderness during the process of hiding, if they continued like this, they would be caught sooner or later. At this point, Song Yu finally had to face the fact that they had been surrounded by those zombie-like things, and the encirclement was gradually closing in. What should we do? Not to mention the girl's anxiety, her two companions were also in a somewhat delicate situation. Xiao Ruoying had been hesitant to speak, Her hands clenched tightly, and from time to time, she peeked at Xiao Zhengyi. Xiao Zhengyi, on the other hand, had become more and more silent after being injured. At first, he would make some suggestions about the direction of escape, but now he didn't say a word. Suddenly, Xiao Zhengyi stood up and walked slowly to Songyu, who was biting her thumbnail and thinking hard. "Officer Xiao, what's wrong?" Songyu raised her head subconsciously. The next moment, Xiao Zhengyi raised his leg and kicked Songyu's lower abdomen fiercely. After a dull sound, the girl was kicked nearly 2 meters away. Finally, she crashed heavily into the pavilion's pillar before falling to the ground. At the moment when Songyu was attacked, the Shin Pearl emitted a glow to fight back, but it was offset by the 2 layers of protection of the bracelet on Xiao Zhengyi's hand. In the end, the Shin Pearl could only protect the girl as much as possible, so the blow that could directly kill her was reduced to just making her vomit on the ground. "Sister Song." Xiao Ruoying immediately got up to help Songyu, but was stopped by Xiao Zhengyi. Xiao Zhengyi said, but his tone was very strange. It was as if he had changed into a slow old man, and it made people shudder. "The heavens have taken good care of me. Not only did they give me such an excellent body, they even gave me a ready-made soul knot." Xiao Ruoying's body began to tremble, and her pupils shrank a little. She looked at Xiao Zhengyi with an expression full of fear. "It's you? Huh? Judging from your reaction, could it be that you're one of the subjects I used for my experiments?" A sickly smile appeared on Xiao Zhengyi's face. "But I'm sorry, I've handled too many experimental subjects, so it's impossible for me to remember their faces. But in the words of Buddhism, this is fate." Cough cough, Ruoying run. Songyu, who was still kneeling on the ground, did her best to maintain her consciousness. She didn't allow herself to faint because of her injuries, and she used the last of her strength to weakly speak to Xiao Ruoying. "Do you want to run?" Xiao Zhengyi didn't seem to care at all. He just spread his arms, as if he was devising a strategy. "If you want to play a game of human and ghost, I don't mind." Xiao Ruoying was silent for a moment. She didn't run away, but slowly approached Xiao Zhengyi. "I've been hesitating. I don't know if I should get close to Big Brother," she said softly. "Huh? What are you talking about?" Xiao Zhengyi frowned in displeasure. "I've been very willful since I was young." The girl didn't care at all about the other party's malicious words, and continued to speak. "I know that Big Brother doesn't like me, but I still like to be with Big Brother, because I like Big Brother the most. I know better than anyone the gentleness hidden under Big Brother's appearance. No matter how much you hate me, you'll still cover me with a blanket, chase away the mosquitoes in the mosquito net for me, and talk to me patiently. If I'm bullied outside, you'll immediately take me to take revenge. Even if you're beaten by the king of children who are older than you, you'll never admit defeat. Every time I get lost in the mountains, you'll always be the first to find me. When Mom and Dad aren't home, you'll cook for me and coax me to sleep. That's why I always want to stay by Big Brother's side. I'm sorry, I'm so willful. It must be very difficult for you, right?" At that time, Big Brother was clearly studying for an important exam, but I still willfully stayed by your side and distracted you. I know Big Brother's wish, and I understand Big Brother's pressure, but I can't help Big Brother at all. That's why I worked very hard to find the 4-leaf clover in the wild that day. They all say that the 4-leaf clover can bring good luck. If you have that, Big Brother, you'll definitely be able to get into the university you like, right? The girl loosened her tightly clenched fist, revealing the 4-leaf clover that she had found with great difficulty. Then, she held it with both hands and handed it to Xiao Zhengyi. "If there's anything I miss about this world, it must be this." Xiao Ruoying's body trembled slightly in the cold wind of the winter night. Like a delicate cherry blossom that would wither at any time, she revealed a sad but beautiful smile. "I'm sorry, I'm so late to give it to you." Many green dots of light appeared around her. They were the wraiths that had once stuck together with Xiao Ruoying. Before they entered the cycle of reincarnation, they returned to the present world in order to repay Xiao Ruoying, who had always supported them as the core and fulfilled their wishes. Even if it was only for a short 10 seconds, it was enough to lend Xiao Ruoying power, allowing her to freely control this body and fulfill her last wish in this world. The appearance of these firefly-like human souls rendered this scene as illusory and ethereal as a dream. Xiao Zhengyi stared blankly at the girl in front of him. The next moment, his right hand pierced through the girl's chest. The light of the human souls disappeared, and everything around him fell from the warm dream to the cold reality. Humph. Boring. Xiao Zhengyi, who had not reacted since the beginning, grinned coldly. Do you think I'll let you go to the afterlife? Because her body was made of clay. There was no blood, so only fine sand flowed out of the girl's penetrated chest. The kind of cracks that would only appear on porcelain started from the wound and gradually spread to the girl's body. On her face, there was no despair at the pain she was about to suffer, only hatred for herself for being so shallow and unable to awaken Big Brother. Chapter 6:17. It's about time to end all of this. Xiao Zhengyi clenched his right hand into a fist inside Xiao Ruoying's body, as if he was holding on to something. He planned to pull it out of Xiao Ruoying's body. This way, I can finally achieve the condition of eternal life. Xiao Ruoying's petite body trembled in pain because of this action, but even so, she still held the four-leaf clover in front of her chest, not letting it fall. Quick, stop. Songyu tried to stand up, but at this time, it was already very difficult for her to stay awake. At that moment, Xiao Zhengyi's left hand, which had been hanging by his side, suddenly reached behind his back and took out the Yuan Rong sword that he had stuffed back into his pocket during his escape. Then, he swung the sword and fiercely chopped his own right arm. It was obviously not a very sharp and rusty ancient sword, but with such a strike, it easily chopped off his entire right arm from the elbow. Suddenly, a large amount of blood spurted out from the broken arm, dyeing the four-leaf clover in Xiao Ruoying's hand red and staining the girl's face. Like tears of blood, they slid down from her eyes. Brother? Xiao Ruoying's body, which had lost its support, fell limply to the ground. Finally, she knelt on the ground and stared at Xiao Zhengyi with an expression that was unclear whether it was joy or sorrow. Ga-ah! What's going on? Do you still have consciousness? Caught off guard, Xiao Zhengyi, whose right arm had been chopped off, the right side of his face distorted and he let out a painful scream. However, the left side of his face only frowned slightly. At first glance, it looked as if his face had been split in half from the middle. It was quite terrifying. I've always regretted that I wasn't able to personally avenge Ruo Ying back then. This regret is like a maggot in my bones, constantly eating away at my heart when I was not aware of it. Accompanied by the dazzling double protection bracelet on his left wrist, the left side of Xiao Zhengyi's face said slowly and calmly, "The reason why I was so aggressive towards the criminal was also because of this self-blame and hatred towards that person in my heart." What are you trying to say? The right face of Xiao Zhengyi said angrily, from the twitching muscles on his cheek. He seemed to be trying hard to regain full control of his body, but the left side of his face remained unmoved. You didn't really die. Instead, you attached yourself to my body by chance. I think this is the so-called fate. As he spoke, Xiao Zhengyi held the broken Yuanrong sword in his left hand and pointed the sharp end of the broken sword at his chest, or rather, his heart. Of everything you've said, I only agree with one thing. It's about time to end everything. Stop. This is your body. If you do that, you'll die too. You, who yearn for immortality, will probably never be able to understand. Xiao Zhengyi's left face laughed bitterly. Sometimes, living is even more painful than dying. With that, Xiao Zhengyi stabbed his own chest with the Yuanrong sword. Just as the sharp part of the blade was about to pierce his skin, a hand gripped the back of the Yuanrong sword's hilt, forcibly stopping its downward momentum. Old Su. Xiao Zhengyi looked at the person who had appeared beside him without him noticing. His left face first showed a surprised expression, then calmed down. Sorry, I'm a bit late, Su Shenqing said indifferently, as if he was neither happy nor sad. Protect my sister. Leave it to me. After receiving Su Xinxing's guarantee, Xiao Jingyi's left eye slowly closed. In the next moment, an expression of ecstasy returned to his face, and the different expressions on his left and right sides finally disappeared. Xiao Jingyi let go of the Yuanrong sword's hilt, and with a strength exceeding that of a normal person's body, he suddenly jumped, maintaining a distance of 7 or 8 meters from Su Xinxing. Humph! My consciousness has finally disappeared. This way, the biggest obstacle is... Before he could finish his words, he was stunned. On the other side, Su Xinxing was looking at him with a cold gaze. However, this was not the main reason why Xiao Jingyi froze. It was because the surroundings had already entered a harsh winter. Other than a few evergreen trees, the forest had long been occupied by bare trees. The forest that looked incomparably desolate had now somehow become as lively as summer. Whether it was the bare trees or the shrubs on the ground, they had become lush and verdant. Then, all kinds of flowers from different seasons fought to be the first to bloom. In the blink of an eye, the back mountain of Jiangjin University had become a sea of flowers. In the next moment, everything around him seemed to be an illusion, returning to the harsh winter. Only the thick layer of dead leaves and petals on the ground could prove that everything he had seen was not an illusion. The world seemed to have gone crazy. All kinds of seasons, weather, and natural phenomena began to appear one after another, but they would only last for a short moment. In the end, although the trees continued to sprout, they had completely lost their original appearance. Colorful leaves filled the forest, and strange-looking mushrooms were everywhere. It was clearly night, but there were several celestial bodies in the sky that cast light like the sun, illuminating the purple miasma in the forest. Even Xiao Zhengyi, who was so vicious that he treated humans as lab rats, was frightened by the absurd scene in front of him. He did not know what to do. On the other side, Mo Li lightly tapped Song Yu's body. The girl's originally somewhat hazy consciousness immediately woke up. Even the dull pain from her broken ribs disappeared. What's going on? She had also seen everything that was happening around her, and could not help but ask Emoli with some apprehension. The landlord is angry. Emoli blinked and whispered, "The world is broken. Will it be okay if this continues?" Song Yu was shocked by him. "Don't panic, speak." Emoli was very calm. "I've already set up a barrier." Oh, as expected of Emoli. Emoli, super awesome. Emoli proudly raised the sweet potato paper bag in his hand, and then looked at Xiao Ruoying, who still had her arm in her chest. He made a difficult decision. "Do you want to eat?" Xiao Ruoying finally came back to her senses. She looked at Emoli, then shook her head and asked worriedly, "Brother, are you okay?" "It's okay, the landlord will take care of it." Emoli put the paper bag on his head, and then for the first time, his small face revealed a guilty expression. "There's only one problem." "What problem?" Song Yu asked curiously. But Emoli shook his head, and no matter how the paper bag on his head shook, he refused to answer. On the other side of the world, at the end of the endless sea of stars, a purple-haired girl with a gorgeous magic staff on her back suddenly raised her head. She used her gem-like eyes to stare at the eternal starry sky and softly said, "Ah, Sir Brave Warrior, I finally found you. It must be some kind of illusion. You want to use this kind of thing to scare me away. What a joke." Xiao Zhengyi roared loudly, as if he wanted to use this to cover up the uneasiness in his heart. Originally, people like you only need to use their fists. But Su Xinxing acted as if he didn't hear his words, and continued to say, "But your actions make me very unhappy. And I'm unhappy from the bottom of my heart. Plus, Xiao Jingyi is my friend, so it doesn't matter if I let you suffer a bit." For some reason, Xiao Jingyi felt a chill crawl up his back. "Arrogant person." He shouted loudly. A lot of ghouls appeared around the pavilion. At some point, these zombie-like things had quietly crept up. But Su Xinxing didn't care about these things, and only raised his arm. A simple and unadorned sword tore through the air and fell into his hand. "Although it will hurt a bit, it's better to endure it." Su Xinxing glanced at the other party, who looked as if he was facing a great enemy. "Don't worry. I'm not saying this to you, but to the world." In the next moment, Su Xinxing swung his sword at him. Chapter 618. It was an ordinary sword strike. It was a sword that could split heaven and earth. Although the two seemed to contradict each other, at least at this moment, these two completely different situations, which could even be said to be two extremes, completely merged together in Su Xinxing's hands. In the next moment, an unparalleled power rumbled through the entire space. First, the ground covered in colorful leaves. The thick soil that had turned white due to the necrosis of the world was peeled off. It was as if gravity had been reversed, and it began to fly towards the sky. Immediately after, the exposed brown rocks of the mountain also began to disintegrate under the power that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. It broke into countless small pieces of rock and flew into the sky along with the soil. Then, the whistling mountain wind spread and swept through the hollow. It was so powerful that it even caused Emoli, who was eating a sweet potato, to shake his hand and press half of the sweet potato onto his face. In fact, if it wasn't for the protection of her barrier, just the spreading and gradually growing stronger mountain wind would have been able to flip the entire Jiangjin upside down. While the mountain wind that was trapped in the enchantment was roaring at the top of its lungs, one could vaguely hear screams such as, "Wah! I was just taking a nap. How did I wake up and even the spring water has been torn apart?" Brother, Xiao Ruoying, who was also protected by Emoli, couldn't help but be a little absent-minded when she saw the tragic scene in front of her. This move of Shen Xing's, he wouldn't directly turn Officer Xiao into ashes, right? Because the visual impact of this move directly hollowing out half of the mountain was too great. Song Yu couldn't help but worry for Xiao Jingyi. Although she had confidence in Su Xinxing, what if old Su's hand accidentally slipped? Of course, Su Xinxing naturally had his reasons for doing this. Although the visual effect of the sword was quite shocking, in terms of actual power and consumption, it probably couldn't even compare to old Su's series of following the karma line to chop you. After all, he hadn't been able to control his power very well recently. If he really accidentally killed Xiao Jingyi, that would be awkward. It was precisely because of this that he used the sacred sword, of course. Anger was also one of the reasons. And then used the smallest amount of power to activate the sacred sword to cut off the foreign object in Xiao Jingyi's soul. Therefore, in fact, old Su's attack just now was actually his weakest attack. The reason it caused such damage was purely because of the power that spread out by the sacred sword itself. How is this possible? Like a defeated Yacha, Xiao Jingyi collapsed in the crater with smoke coming out of his whole body. He seemed to be trying to struggle, but because he couldn't even move a finger, he looked as if he was trembling non-stop. How is this possible? There is such a ridiculous thing. Oh, Su Xinxing, Su Xinxing, Su Xinxing, Hades? Su Xinxing, Hades' gods. After he finished speaking, he raised his sword and got into a posture of finishing off the enemy. Wait a minute. Xiao Jingyi was so scared that he trembled even more. His tongue seemed to have finally straightened out because of the shock, and he spoke a lot more coherently. "I have solved the mystery of the human soul. I am the greatest medical scientist of this era. I have made an outstanding contribution to the medical field. My merits definitely outweigh my mistakes. 731 has also made a contribution to the history of medicine, but unfortunately, I don't want to forgive that kind of guy." Su Xinxing was expressionless. If my research data is made public, the history of medicine will definitely have an amazing leap. Even immortality will no longer be a dream. Xiao Jingyi shouted hysterically. "For such a great research, some sacrifices are necessary. How can you kill such a great person like me?" So that's how it is. It was probably because he felt that his sorrowful wish and actions were great that he could treat humans as lab rats without any psychological burden, and kill them without hesitation or guilt. Facing such a guy, Su Xinxing didn't even have the mood to continue talking to him. "It's none of my business." He swung his sword a second time, and completely destroyed the guy who was attached to Xiao Zhengyi's soul from this world. Although he didn't use the Pluto sacred sword, which was one of the 12 sacred swords, and couldn't cut it clean, the main part was basically taken care of, and the remaining scraps could be used as nourishment to strengthen the soul. Presumably, after this matter was over, Xiao Jingyi's spiritual power would increase by a considerable amount. He wouldn't be easily possessed like this time, right? Too much. Too much. The earth god, whose face was covered in dust, slapped the soil hard. I was just sleeping, and the result was that I was almost buried alive. I'm still an earth god. The earth god who was buried alive has never heard of this before. When Su Xinxing put away his holy sword, the plants and soil that had been blown into the sky by the overflowing power of the holy sword rustled and fell back down. However, the vegetation had disappeared, and there was only loose soil everywhere. It looked like the entire mountain had been loosened. Naturally, the earth god's realm within the mountain was also destroyed by Su Xinxing's weakest attack X2. When he was serious. Because of the abnormality in the world, the earth god was directly stuck in the white soil. If it wasn't for Mo Li's help, he might really have become the first earth god in history to be buried alive. Fortunately, after Mo Li removed the barrier, this small area of the world also returned to normal with her help. Oh, Mo Li, who had a sweet potato paper bag on his head, answered absent-mindedly. He was still playing with the NS that he took from the Earth Loli's realm when he saved her. Humph. No need to thank me. I just helped you get rid of some filth. Su Xinxing imitated the face of a handsome guy on TV and said seriously. As if I'd thank you. You have to compensate me. It's impossible for me to compensate you. Not in this lifetime. This is the first time I've seen such a self-righteous person reneging on a debt. Earth God Loli's face twitched, and then she looked at Songyu. But the latter's attention wasn't on them, but on the siblings not far away. I'm sorry, Ruoying. I couldn't protect you. Xiao Zhengyi, whose broken arm had been treated simply, looked at the girl in front of him. It was as if a bottle of mixed feelings had been knocked over in his heart. His emotions were complicated, but most of all he felt guilty. No matter if it was 10 years ago or today, I couldn't protect you. He bit his lips hard, and then laughed dryly at himself. Or rather, it's because of me that you get hurt every time. As expected, I don't deserve to be your brother. It doesn't matter if you hate me. It doesn't matter if you want to cause trouble for me. It doesn't matter if you take my life now. I don't expect you to forgive me. Because he had bitten his lips, Xiao Zhengyi felt that the taste of blood in his mouth was exceptionally bitter. I only hope that these things can eliminate your resentment, so that you won't be bound and tortured by resentment, and that you can be reborn like an ordinary person. Xiao Ruoying and Xiao Zhengyi looked at each other quietly. After a while, the girl laughed. Really, brother? You haven't changed at all, she said softly. Xiao Zhengyi was a bit confused. Since Xiao Ruoying died, he should have changed a lot. Although he was still considered a sunny person, he was much more extreme and impulsive. His temper was also more irritable than before. Not only his relatives and friends in the past, even his own parents used to ask him to cultivate his character and not be so impatient. Xiao Ruoying was the only one who said that he hadn't changed. Yes, aren't you still as gentle as before? The girl nodded without hesitation. Then she stretched out her right hand and opened her palm. Lying in her hand was a 4-leaf clover that was full of wrinkles and stained with blood and dust. I couldn't give it to you 10 years ago, and you couldn't accept it before. I'm sorry, it's wrinkled and dirty now. Brother, can you accept this as a token of my sincerity? Ruo-ing? Xiao Zhengyi's left hand trembled as he held the girl's hand and stared at the 4-leaf clover. What I want hasn't changed. I've never hated you, brother. It's great to be able to become brother-sister. Although it's only been 10 years, it's great to be able to live with you. At this point, the girl's voice became choked with sobs. I should be the one saying sorry. Because of me, you must have been in pain all these years, right? Even if I'm such a willful sister, a sister who caused you so much trouble in the next life. If there's a next life, will brother still be willing to be my family? Don't talk about the next life, even if it's the next life. The next life. It doesn't matter even if it's the next life. This time, I'll definitely treat you well. I'll definitely announce to the world that I have a sister who I love the most, who I'm most proud of, and who's most gentle. I'll definitely treat you like the most precious treasure, and protect you as you grow up. Don't be like this. The girl finally couldn't hold it in anymore. She, who theoretically couldn't cry, had large teardrops fall from her eyes. Brother, don't be like this. Oh, if you do this, I won't be able to bear to reincarnate. Xiao Jingyi used his remaining hand to sorrowfully and tenderly pull the girl into his embrace. I can't accept this. I still want to stay with brother for a longer time. We grew up together, we went to school together, we traveled together. If brother has a girlfriend, you should bring her to me, who's so picky, to let me know who stole you away. But why did I die so early? This way, I can't do anything. I can't accept this. I'm sorry. Xiao Jingyi's cheeks were also streaked with tears. He could only repeat over and over again, Ruoying, I'm sorry. The brother and sister hugged each other and cried. After an unknown amount of time, a ray of light lit up the horizon. Perhaps it was because the world within the barrier was in a broken state, and even the flow of time had changed. The sky was about to brighten. Xiao Ruoying sniffled, and then reluctantly struggled out of Xiao Zhengyi's embrace. The sun gradually began to envelop the early morning Jiangjin. The girl's back was facing the rising sun, and she looked at her brother for a very long time. It's time for me to go, she said sorrowfully but resolutely. Otherwise, I'll definitely become obsessed with my brother, and I won't be able to reincarnate. Ruoying. Xiao Jingyi looked at his sister in disappointment. She clearly still looked like a child from 10 years ago, but at this moment, he could clearly feel the passage of time and the growth of his sister. Although this short life has been filled with sorrow and pain, I don't regret it at all. The girl's eyes were filled with tears, but she smiled resolutely. Because it's really great to have a brother like you. That's what I think too. Xiao Zhengyi used his sleeve to wipe his face full of tears and snot. At least, before the other party left, he didn't want her to see his sorrow. I'm really blessed to have a sister like you. The girl nodded, and under the illumination of the rising sun, she revealed the most brilliant and beautiful smile. Then, she turned around and walked towards the rising sun. Her delicate figure looked like it was about to melt into the rising sun. In the next moment, Xiao Jingyi collapsed. He quickly rushed forward, grabbed the girl's hand, and then shouted at Su Xinxing and the others, "Why does Ruoying have to leave? Don't you have a way to make her stay?" His expression was fierce, but his voice was close to that of a stray dog begging. Unfortunately, if the soul of the deceased stays in the world for too long, it will definitely become an evil spirit, so it's best to send her to reincarnate. Earth God Lowly said slowly. From her rare serious expression, it was clear that she wasn't joking. That's right, spirit ghost. Old Su, isn't your spirit ghost also a ghost? Xiao Jingyi looked at Su Xinxing. Spirit ghosts are the product of evil techniques. If you don't mind using evil techniques that might affect your sister's soul, then after she's tortured, I can help you refine her into a spirit ghost. But what answered him was Earth God Lowly's cold voice. Her voice was like a curse, shattering his last hope. Is there really no other way? Xiao Jingyi knelt on the ground in a daze, but he still refused to let go of Xiao Ruoying's hand. Instead, he held it even tighter, as if he was afraid that if he let go, Xiao Ruoying would disappear. It's not that there's no other way. Su Xinxing didn't want to see his friend in such pain, so he sighed. But your right hand will never grow back. Now, as long as I bring the Holy Spirit medicine from the apartment, your hand can still recover. If this can make Ruoying stay, it's just a hand, you can take it. Xiao Jingyi replied without hesitation. Why would I want your broken hand? Really, it's because I knew you would definitely choose this side that I didn't want to say anything. Su Xinxing scratched his head, and finally sighed helplessly. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel, where We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.